and me, so they know we're here.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. How do you get rid of it?
That just came up. We're in a meeting. It's gonna start.
Oh.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Those captures out there, what are those?
Those are for those bins that Bruce wants.
Oh. Okay. These tires. Are the brake tires. Your little.
You know, where you're here. No.
Oh, I see.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hello. All right.
Hi,
So
Tony.
Morning.
all right, let's you got to bring the preamble up here, or where do I read it from?
Yeah, we'll bring it up. We're getting some
Somebody left it on.
feedback. Is one of your mics on? Or just someone? Is one of your mics on, Matt? We're getting some weird feedback.
I'm not connected.
Turned on. How we doing?
Is everyone on? Is everyone muted?
Move your speakers, Dan, on your laptop.
Oh, just the results. It was just mine. Looks like we do have form, so if you want to bring the preamble up, we can get started.
All right. Dan's announced that we have a forum, so we'll get started with the Landmarks Commission meeting of October 26th, 2023. In accordance with notification requirements of Ohio's open meeting law and section 101.021 of the codified ordinances of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the City Planning Department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by roll call vote. Recusal from any case due to conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the beginning of a presentation. In order to ensure that everyone participating in the meeting has an opportunity to be heard, virtual attendees will use the raised hand feature before asking a question or making a comment. The raised hand feature can be found in the participants panel on the desktop and mobile versions and activated by clicking the hand icon. Please wait for the chair or facilitator to recognize you and be sure to select unmute and announce yourself before you speak. When finished speaking, please lower your hand by clicking on the raised hand icon again and mute your microphone. Call-in users can unmute by using *6. All meeting activity is being recorded via the WebEx platform. These proceedings are also being streamed via YouTube. All requests to speak on a particular matter submitted through proper channels has been considered. Communication with members of this body must follow prior channels for consideration. Any comments received by stated deadline are collected by Landmark staff and disseminated to the commission members prior to any scheduled meeting. Dan, if you want to go through the meeting rules.
Sure. So the meeting rules and procedures for the Cleveland Landmarks Commission, the chair will call each agenda item, and then each applicant will be invited to proceed through their presentation. Each presentation should be completed prior to questions and comments from the commission in order to facilitate a smooth presentation. Once the presentation has concluded, the chair will ask Landmark staff to summarize design review committee recommendations and any public comments received. The deadline for public comment is noon on the Tuesday prior to any regularly scheduled Cleveland Landmarks Commission meeting. Any received comments are distributed to the commission members prior to the meeting. Staff will identify any members of the public present and scheduled to speak. Public comment is allowed at the discretion of the chair, and any individual providing public comment is permitted 2 minutes to speak to the agenda item in which they have an interest. The chair will then request a recommendation from staff. The commission will then begin deliberations and project review. Any commission member except the chair may make a motion at any point after an agenda item has been called.
With that, we'll bring the October 26th, 2023 Landmarks Commission meeting to order. Dan, please call the roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Dreyer?
Here.
Mr. Edmond? Councilmember Gray? Director Wong?
Here.
Mr. Sandbury? Here. Mr. Trasick?
Here.
Dr. Williams?
Here.
Ms. Trott? And Mr. Strickland.
Here. All right.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we have quorum. Also wanted to note, in addition to the commission members, we have Patricia Aston, our representative from the Law Department, as well as Jessica Beam, Carl Brunges, and myself from Landmark staff.
All right. Thank you very much. First on the agenda is a report on transit-oriented development from City Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Matt Moss. I'm the Manager of Strategic Planning Initiatives with the City Planning Commission. And I'm here to give you an update and a report on some work we've been doing around transit-oriented development, transportation demand management, some legislation that we drafted that council approved back in August, and the program that will create and be implemented by March of next year. So I'm going to go over some brief terms, have some graphics to share, some information, and then I'd be happy to answer whatever questions I can.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Thank you.
You're too far away. Thanks, Carl. I'll let you know when I need the next slide. So just to set the table here a little bit, much of the impetus for this work comes from Mayor Bibb's desire for us to examine and work towards implementing policies that would make Cleveland more of a 15-minute city. This is a concept you may have heard before and may have heard quite a bit about, depending upon your news sources, but essentially it's a pretty simple concept here for us in Cleveland. Essentially what we're trying to do is just make it easier to access basic needs and amenities within a 15-minute walk, like ride, transit trip, or even a car ride. The good news is that if you own a car and you have access to a car, you can get anywhere you need just about within 15 minutes. So that box is checked. We're working on making providing that level of service and accessibility to those who can't drive, don't own a car, or might want to get around on some of these other modes. Good. And so what do we mean when we say TOD? So TOD has a lot of definitions. This is the one we're sort of using in Cleveland now. This is the definition that we share with not just the Regional Transit Authority, Greater Cleveland RTA, but also the County Planning Commission. We've done some work around codifying this and working on what this means for our region. But essentially, it's a land use pattern that centers mixed-use walkable developments around transit infrastructure. So that could be bus or rail. And then for Cleveland specifically, TOD is a focus for new investment. But many of our existing corridors, especially those that are designated as landmark districts, were originally built to be transit-oriented. Back when the city was a streetcar network, now we have bus lines that run at various frequencies, but often at high frequencies in Cleveland. And lastly, what is TDM? So TDM is a term that's grown in use in the planning world and the transportation world. There are a lot of different definitions, a lot of ways to conceive of this, but essentially it's just managing demand for a transportation network. So that could be a road, a highway, a bus line, a train line, any type of transportation mode or network. And again, all you need to really know at this point is that transportation demand management is a set of strategies and tools aimed at maximizing traveler choice. So oftentimes people feel like in our region that they can only drive to get to the things they need to do. And so what TDM means relevant to our work and what we're doing here in Cleveland now is how can we make other choices just as convenient, just as accessible, just as available to residents. And so again, some of you I'm sure are familiar with Cleveland's history. In the 1920s, Cleveland was a very dense, very large city in terms of population. The region itself had about 1.4 million people, and there were various parts of the city that were relatively dense. And so the graph at the bottom and the chart to the side shows census tracts in Cleveland at various levels of population per acre, with many census tracts well above 30 people per acre. Jumping ahead to 2010, you can see the line chart showing the region's population growing, Cleveland's population shrinking. This is something we know and have been exposed to, and information that we know intuitively at this point. But showing, I think this graph is useful in showing that slide in terms of while the city itself has grown slightly geographically, the census tracts have gotten less dense. So there are just fewer people living in any sort of acre or square mile of the city. And so what that means is that it becomes harder to serve those people with transportation modes like transit. And so again, TOD and TDM, these two tools and concepts are expressions of this idea of making it easier to access your basic needs or amenities within a 15-minute walk, bike ride, transit trip, or even driving. And so the goal of this is to permit and support that vibrant, dynamic neighborhoods where residents can access these things through these various modes whenever they would like. And so as a subset of that, and part of the definition of that is high frequency transit. And so high frequency transit in our region is transit with a headway. And so that means a bus or a train arrives at that station every 15 minutes or so that's sort of, we're right now sort of at the upper end of that threshold. And so this graph here, or this map here shows in that red outline those areas where RTA provides that level of frequent transit service either by bus or by rail. And so that area is within a quarter mile or 5-minute walk of the high frequency transit stops. And that's what we're defining as the TOD zone. So this is, in other words, if you're within this red outline, you're within a 5-minute walk of a high frequency transit stop, whether it's bus or rail. So what does this actually look like as a part of the city? And so you can sort of look at this from a population perspective. It's 47% of the city's population. It's 73% of the city's non-white population. 40% of the city by land is within this area. Over half of the city's owned vacant lots, so that includes land make lots. 70% of all workplaces in the city of Cleveland are within that TOD zone, and it's slightly more of all workplaces specifically for Black employees. And then again, 23% of households, almost 1 in 4 households in that 5-minute walk of high frequency transit do not have access to a car. 70% of households, so almost 3/4 of households in that, just again, within that 5-minute walk of high frequency transit have either no car available or only 1 car. So that means it's likely that they're taking trips outside of their household by walking, biking, or some other type of mode other than driving. And again, I included this slide because some of our members of the Planning Commission wanted to get a sense of where transit ridership was and how it's recovering, especially after the pandemic. So this slide just shows that average ridership. So this is a snapshot. This is showing data from 2020, 2022, and 2023. But it's also a snapshot from May of this year, showing that transit ridership peaks during its most active on weekdays, but it's also recovering from sort of the peak that we had prior to the pandemic. So this is just some information in case you were curious. Oh, and I should say that 8% of the statistic at the top is interesting too, that 8% of employee residents commute via public transit. So that's pretty low in terms of, again, reflecting on how many jobs are located near high frequency transit versus how many employee residents commute via public transit. There's a discrepancy there. So what are we doing about this? Well, so the TDM legislation that council adopted that we are currently implementing essentially swaps out the requirement in our zoning code to build off-street parking for any type of use, housing, retail, institutional, any type of use for TDM in the TUD zone. So in other words, if you're within a 5-minute walk of high frequency transit, instead of building parking, our code will require, depending upon the size of your project, that you implement some type of transportation demand management measure. So what that means is you have to, in some ways, make it easier to walk, bike, or ride transit to or from your development. Again, whether it's housing, commercial, institutional. So this applies to new construction, but also substantial rehabilitations of existing buildings. And so when projects are, think of the warehouse conversions or office conversions into housing, it applies to those projects too. And so that legislation is passed. Right now, we're establishing the program itself. The legislation enables the Planning Commission to adopt standards that projects will then have to follow, similar to the entitlement process that you're already familiar with. And what are we doing about this? What's going to come later? What are we also working on? This dovetails really nicely with the form-based code pilot, which you've been informed of. This would not supplement that or not replace that in any sense. It would really supplement and augment it in terms of our form-based code right now. It does not have parking requirements in it, but it also doesn't, it's sort of agnostic at this point to whether it's located near transit or not. And so this specifically would incentivize and require those uses near transit to then actually incentivize utilizing that resource. So we're working on those map changes on a case-by-case basis, region by region. And so to give you a sense of what the current entitlement landscape, so to speak, is near, that it is within that TUD zone, near high frequency transit, there's a lot to look at this graphic. And so it's sort of a demonstration of some of the tools we're developing that I can share more about in the future to just examine the geography of the city and the regulatory environment. All you really need to know is this is essentially a breakdown of the zoning types within that 5-minute walk of high frequency transit. And essentially, it's about 60% of the land that's zoned within our TUD zones only permits 1 or 2 housing units by right. So it's single or 2-family zoning. That's most of the land within a 5-minute walk of high frequency transit. So even if you wanted to build to a density that could support transit, which is again generally 20 to 30 units an acre for the level of transit service that we currently provide in the city of Cleveland, zoning wise you can't do it. And so what are we talking about? What does this mean for us? What does it tell us as planners? We're not necessarily saying, okay, now we're going to rezone this whole area to allow mixed use, high rise, 60+ unit buildings by right. What would it mean in this area to allow 4 units on a lot instead of 2, or allow accessory dwelling units? Because right now those aren't permitted either. And so given the size of our city, the extent to which we have these transit corridors, that contributes to a significant density over time and over space that would really support transit long term. And so this is where we're at now, and to give you a sense of what we want to transition to in the future. So what are some key takeaways? Like I said, over roughly about 60% of the land within that 5-minute walk doesn't permit more than 2 units to be built. Within that TUD zone, again, within that 5-minute walk of high frequency transit, there's over 17,000 vacant lots today. So those are opportunities for us to build housing, to build retail, to reuse in some type of way, whether it's development like vertical development or even just more green space, more space that's usable and useful for people. But we also need flexibility in terms of what kind of housing that is, from ADUs to townhomes to missing middle apartments, all the way to large scale multifamily. And we consider this condition to be really a challenge and an emergency in the sense that we have residents in our city who can't drive, who don't have access to a car, in a built environment that doesn't make it easy to live that way. And so why are we focused on parking? Parking takes a lot of space. This sort of dives more deeper into what I just mentioned previously about why we take this so seriously. So again, roughly 25% of households in Cleveland do not have a car. Again, 70% of households near high-frequency transit either have 0 or 1 car available. And again, 1 in 5 Clevelanders are just too young to drive. They are under the age of 16 and they can't get a license. And so again, we are creating this regulatory environment that is in some ways hostile to their existence in our city. And so, but it's also an opportunity. We have, again, over 200,000 jobs within that transit, that PUD zone. And most of the people who work in the city work within a 5-minute walk of high-frequency transit. And then we have, again, that 17,000 vacant lots transit to about 2,800 acres of vacant land within the PUD zone. In this graph here, this diagram here I borrowed from the American Planning Association. It shows roughly how much space you need to actually build a parking space. It's not just the space to park the car, it's the space to maneuver in and out of the parking space, the driveways to get in and out of the property where the car is stored. It roughly translates to the size of a 1 to 2 bedroom apartment. And so this is the space that we're not saying you can't build anymore in the city of Cleveland or within TOD, those TOD zones. It's just right now it's been required. Until now, it's been a mandate from the city. So now we're trying to switch to a build what you need model rather than you have to build a certain amount based on our zoning code. And so what does TDM actually look like? This is sort of a peek under the hood of what we're actually talking about. We developed what's called a TDM menu. So it's a menu of these strategies that we want businesses and developers, employers to provide. It includes things like subsidizing transit passes for your employees or your tenants, building long-term bicycle storage facilities. And so that's essentially a fancy way of saying, if you live in a building and you should have a secure indoor covered place to secure your bicycle, it just makes it easier to then rely on that mode as a way of getting around. And then we have other options here, like providing a van pool if you're an employer, or if you're a large apartment building, if you have a car share program, you get points for that too. And so various menu options are assigned various points. And depending upon the size of your project, required to meet certain points in order to comply with the program. So this is a breakdown of a project that the program doesn't apply right now, but we worked with a project in University Circle called Stokes West. That project was intending and desired to not build the code required current minimum amount of parking. And so in order to do that, we facilitated them piloting this in terms of mitigating that impact on the transportation network and the neighborhood. So these are some of the options they selected. The project itself, well, I'll just mention briefly the tiers. So this is all subject to change slightly because the Planning Commission will again adopt these as program standards for the TDM program. But these are essentially the current tiers we're thinking of. Whatever element of the project, whether it's dwelling units, retail square footage, or on-site employees, that whatever element kicks you into that tier is then what defines the tier you're in. So for example, if you're a 25 unit apartment building, you're technically in tier 1, but if you have 10,000 square feet of retail, you're still in tier 2. So it's whatever element kicks you into that threshold is what is currently how the program would work. And then these points would determine the amount of the number or which menu options you have to pick in order to meet or exceed that point threshold. And so again, this is just a rendering of that Stokes West development. You can see it's a large apartment building. And so they picked options, including providing transit passes, providing a bike share program, things like that would make it easier to get around. It's located in University Circle. So it's an area that's well served by transit, has many amenities that you can walk or bike to and also drive to. So trying to move the needle on those options and just making it easier to get around. So again, another view of that project, just so you can see what it looks like. And so I wanted to briefly share just what an applicant were required to put together. It's very similar to what we already see for design review projects. And so it's in addition to what you would put together for a design review project, it would be supporting documentation for the TDM measures that are selected. So that could be, for example, commitment to buy transit passes from the RTA. You've already talked to them, they've agreed to sell them to you, that's worked out. But it might also be, if you're putting in elements to make it easier to bike, like bike storage or a bike share, a justification might be, well, I'm near the towpath trail, or the city's working on developing this road, like Lorraine Avenue, for example, with a bike facility. So I want to invest in that for when that project happens. Whatever justification you can come up with in working with city staff too to help develop that. We're still working out what that documentation actually looks like, but that would be required. And then the way we're enforcing this is through licenses and assessments. So projects within the TUD zone will have to get a license every year for the first 3 years to ensure that they're complying with their program. They're buying the transit passes. They're still they're working with whatever car share program they may have picked, if that's the option they chose. And then assuming they comply with that and they're current on what their plan requires, that would transition to a registration once every 3 years. So trying to make sure that this isn't a burden on projects in terms of being able to enforce the plans. So what does that look like? These are just some examples of site plans that we would probably want to modify with ways in which to call out the actual TDM elements and where they are. So if they're programmatic, obviously they're not probably found on the site plan. But if you are doing things like, well, here's my bike storage, here's where I'm rebuilding a transit stop to have a shelter or have more, to make it a more convenient place to wait for the bus, that kind of thing. Again, another example, this is more of a 2D version. This is actually intro now, but this was an old site plan that was done. But what we liked about it is that it showed these callouts that were very descriptive and a little difficult to read on a presentation, but when you're looking at it, holding it in your hands, easier to just understand, okay, this is this, that is that. And then, so I wanted to just throw, the last thing I'll share is I wanted to throw in these aerial shots. So these are projects that have been built. One is, the one on the left is St. Joseph's Commons. This is a permanent supportive housing project on West 25th, which is a high frequency transit corridor. RTA is currently working on developing that transit line into a bus rapid transit corridor as well. It's a tight site. It's a multifamily supportive housing project, but partly because of the zoning requirements, partly because of their financing requirements, most of the site in the back is parking. So this precludes it from being a park or green space, from planting trees, that kind of thing. This is another project. This is over on 73rd Street in Detroit Shoreway. Again, a large project. It does require parking, but again, our code requires that you can't use this space for other things if you wanted to. And so you have these site plans where you have the perimeters lined with buildings. That's something our code and we desire in order to create that street wall to build that frontage space out. And so what are you left with in the middle? Usually parking. And so we don't expect this to go away necessarily and to look something entirely like this, but we want to move toward the regulatory environment where if you feel like you can do this, if you feel like you can make a project work and you can demonstrate that it does, and it's near high frequency transit that we're also working on improving and increasing in quality and frequency, that if you needed to or could, that space could be usable for people rather than just a place to store cars. And so do we expect this to fully happen? Maybe not, but getting a little bit closer and at least making it possible under our regulatory framework is what we're working on. And so I wanted to share, again, a brief case study. We're not the first city to do this. Buffalo back in 2017 overhauled their entire development code, including their zoning code, and they limited parking requirements citywide, and they require TDM for new construction if it's over 5,000 square feet, and renovations with a change of use if it's over 50,000 square feet. And so like I said, they've done this for about 6 years now. What they found is that projects that have either built parking ended up sharing it with other projects that might not have enough space or the resources to do it because they're just too small, or they have peculiarities in their project or financing that prohibit it or make it difficult. And then new parking that ended up getting built, if it was underutilized, they are able to share it with, again, existing projects or new projects that sprang up around it. And that's something that's really compelling because of the cost of parking and just the cost of building it. They found that transport development got a boost, that there were more mixed-use projects popping up in transit-friendly areas where previously that wasn't happening before the adoption of the new code. And they found that based on these projects that were happening, projects that were, again, renovations of spaces that couldn't provide the parking, again, particularly relevant in landmarks where you might have a property that's entirely built out and you just don't have the space to do that without tearing something down. Those projects actually started applying for permits and getting built and being renovated because they had a pathway to an approval under the new code. And again, at that point, at the bottom, the adaptive uses became more viable. They became possible. And so these are just some of the outcomes we're working on. I'll just be the high level ones. We want to permit more affordable housing products. Parking is expensive to build and expensive to maintain. We want to, quote unquote, legalize many of the treasury commercial and cultural districts. That includes our landmark districts. Many of the buildings that exist today in our landmark districts are non-conforming under our current code. That just creates challenges and barriers to people who want to occupy them with businesses or renovate them or expand them in ways that are architecturally appropriate. It's challenging to do that. It's illegal in a lot of ways. And we want to enable more services and amenities within that 15-minute walk, bike, ride, or transit trip. That's really building the 15 minutes. So I'll end there and happy to answer any questions. Whoops. I don't know if I did that. I can talk about process too if you want, but I just want to leave this out there because it wasn't just me working on this. We had a great team across city planning, the mayor's office, and others. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt. That's a very enlightening presentation.
Thank you.
So I'll open it up to the commission or director if you have any comments.
Thank you to the chair. I just want to commend Matt and his team for really good work. I want to underscore many of the things he said. Just as a summary, I think one of it is, really looking at our historic districts because they were built before parking minimums. And so therefore we're kind of reactivating, basically 15-minute city is like reactivating how our cities used to be. Before we had this very restrictive and segregating zoning. That parking has a cost and that we want, especially for small business owners, like that is quite expensive. And I really think that this proposal, which is not citywide, it's only along the corridors, is a really innovative way to begin activating 15-minute cities along those high frequency transit. And this opportunity to not just take away parking, but to actually add other modes of transportation too. We're not just like removing things, but adding. And so I just think that will rebalance everything in terms of the way that we get around and create more safer streets from a Vision Zero perspective. So I just want to say thank you for all of your work and hopefully these principles are ones we can keep in mind too as we're looking at projects. We're not purview over zoning necessarily, but I think it'll help support the redevelopment of some of our historic corridors.
Yeah, thank you, Director. I've got a question, Matt.
Sure.
So a project that we're both familiar with is one that was proposed at Kenilworth and West 14th Street. And it was, if I remember correctly, a 30 or 40 unit multi-story apartment building proposed with no parking. And in that case, I was in favor of it and you were in favor of it, but it did not go through. And there was a tremendous amount of resistance from the CDC, which built up resistance in the neighborhood for development with no parking. And so I'm just wondering if you're developing a strategy to overcome these kind of cultural hurdles in terms of entrenched, thinking about parking issues.
Sure, that's a great question. There are multiple aspects of that I'd like to touch on. One of them is there isn't any currently high frequency transit in that area in Tremont, which is unfortunate. I think that is a challenge to projects that don't provide parking in general, even that specific project. The site that project was located on is currently and still is a surface parking lot, which I would argue, and we don't have to necessarily go fully down that road today, but is a detriment in some ways to a neighborhood that is walkable and houses people in high quality homes and historic homes along a park. The surface parking lot doesn't necessarily fit in that way as a main use on a property. But I think that's partly why with this strategy and how we've evolved our thinking is focusing on the areas where there is high frequency transit, where the city is looking to make long-term investments in improving the streets there to make it easier to bike and walk. That's why this applies in those areas. Another aspect I would say too that I didn't include in this presentation, but is part of our thinking as staff and our coordination across other departments is reshaping our on-street parking rules and regulations. Right now, they're very much geared towards providing businesses parking. The rules apply during more peak daylight hours. We don't have the flexibility as staff, or we didn't for a long time have the flexibility to adjust the rates of parking depending upon demand and usage of parking across the city. That's changed luckily, and it's changed on a similar timeline as the TDM. That was something that council looked at this summer and approved in the fall. And so specific to that project, there are areas of the city, like on Kenilworth, for example, much of that street there didn't allow street parking. It was just prohibited by signage, prohibited by regulation for reasons that didn't seem to be present still at the time. It wasn't clear why there was no parking allowed there. And so that was a common thing, I think, in terms of that conversation, which is street parking can't handle people. The people who live here are obviously going to have cars, and that they're going to park on the street if they can't park off the street. And while it is true that people will probably have a car at some point, or that a building with 30, 40 apartments in it, it's unlikely that there's going to be it's likely that there will be someone who drives and has to store a car somewhere. But the idea here, one of the main reasons why I supported that project and why I would still probably support it is that we should have those types of housing options for people who don't have cars and who might have a car now and don't want to have a car or don't want to pay rent in a building where they don't really get to choose whether that rent includes a parking space or not because the developer built it by choice or by requirement. Those options should exist in every neighborhood in the city of Cleveland.
Yeah.
And we can do things from the city side to make that a little bit easier. Will it have no impact on a neighborhood? No, but also choosing not to do that also has an impact.
And is there a specific strategy to work with RTA to develop more frequent, transit corridors?
There are. We're working on it. Yeah.
So is there some pushback because of, funding issues or?
It's complicated and it's hard to, service. Running more frequent service is a huge expense in terms of staff time and.
So it's kind of a chicken and egg kind of situation, right?
Yeah, it is. What I can say is that there is positive news, I think, in that regard. RTA did get a very large federal grant, $130 million, to replace the rail cars with not just new rail cars, but rail cars that'll be interoperable between the three lines, the red line, the green line, and the blue line. And that's an opportunity. It's an opportunity we're looking at and taking seriously, especially in terms of what it means for the types of land uses, the amount of vacant land, what we can do with that vacant land near those transit stops where those new rail cars will be running. So that's at least from a city planning department's perspective on what we can do to support transit. I think that's where we can add the most value.
If I could, Chair, provide an example of that new train car scenario. So if you were in Shaker Square, you could take that train direct to the airport and instead of having to switch at Tower City. So that new rail car system allows you to switch basically, without having
to go direct. That's great.
So that's an investment that'll make the transit network more useful. And so we want to pair that with, well, how are we making it easier, but also how are we intentionally putting more stuff near those transit stations so that it's even more useful? Because transit's all about proximity and frequency. You have to be able to get to stuff quickly and closely for it to be useful. Because right now it is that way if you drive. And so that's sort of the competition.
Right. And so is there any other commission members that have any comments or questions for Matt? I can't tell. All right. Seeing none, Matt, thank you very much for that great presentation.
Thanks for having me.
Looking forward to the initiative going forward. All right, so that ends our report section of the agenda. We'll move on to certificates of appropriateness. First case is case number 23-103, the Crather Building Horizon Enrichment Center banner replacement. Could the representative please introduce themselves and tell us about your project?
Yeah, hi, my name is Laura Higgins-Wema. I am representing Horizon Education Centers from Brilliant Electric Sign Company is where I'm the permit specialist. This is a very simple project. It's just a face replacement. So they changed Horizon Education is just changing their logo. If you can see, that's the existing, thank you. That's the existing sign that is there now. And we are just, it's already existing. We are not adding any square footage, taking any down. We are just replacing it. That's the existing. If you go to the next slide, this is their new logo, their new trademark logo that they've been doing on all their locations all over. Horizons Education has 26 locations in Northeastern Ohio, and 13 of those locations are in Cleveland. So eventually they're going to be changing out all of them. I've changed out a couple in North Olmsted already, and all over Ohio. But right now, this one, I know it's a very large sign, but that's already existing. So we're only asking just to make it look nicer, putting their new trademark banner in, and you know, it's a great school. It's a great daycare that they have for the kids in that area over in Old Brooklyn, and I don't really see the harm in changing that out since it's already existing. I can understand if it was a new sign being put up, but since it's already there, they're just basically swapping it out for, as you can see, this new with the kids on it and their new logo, which is underneath with the Horizon Education Center, a world of learning, with their website on it. Like I said, they have 13 locations in Cleveland, and we're just asking for approval today for them. That's all
right,
I have. Thank you. Thank you for hearing
right.
me.
All right, thank you. And so do we have a design review report?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This project was reviewed by the Tremont Brooklyn Center Design Review Committee on October 3rd and October 17th. On October 17th, they did recommend for approval as presented, and some of the comments they had was the sign size, location. There is historically a ghost sign behind that sign, and the amount of white space on the sign, as well as possible variances.
Okay. And is there any public comment or CDC input on this project? No. All right, so we'll move on to staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an interesting case because I think it's not just about this one sign. Back in 2016, Horizon applied for a permit to install signage on the building, and that project changed over a course of months. It did go to the local committee and was approved administratively after that. However, part of what we have is issues that there were variances needed, and staff can't grant those variances that should have come here back then. So we have some outstanding signage variances, not just on the wall banner that is being proposed today, but the existing other items as well. So the business ID signage, they are allowed to have 100 square foot max signage for the banner sign, and they are proposing 600 feet. So they will require a variance of 508 square feet for that. It has grown slightly, but it's still within basic parameters of that. The existing blade sign was not to be greater than 12 square feet. The non-conforming variance that is needed for that is 52 square feet.
And so that's an existing.
It was installed with administrative approval that should not have.
At that size?
Yes, okay. And it's basically a 2-story sign.
Mm-hmm.
There is additional business signs, like temporary signs that they have in the windows. That is only allowed to have 25% of total space. So each set of windows is limited to 25% of temporary signage coverage. So I know we can take action on whether or not variance is granted for the banner sign. Is what its content and the white space and the amount, and there's questions as to is that affected here? And do we need to also include retroactive approval for the currently sign that's been in place now for 7 years, 8 years, and say, okay, it's there, and just retroactively approve that? But then we should also probably just a little bit to, because we have to talk about the signage as a whole for the building as well. So do we restrict them to make sure that they only have 25% in their windows as well? So everything is existing. I think it's just a matter of approving it and approving it.
Okay. So does staff have a recommendation for the commission?
I think it's approvable as presented. It's all existing. If there ever comes a time that the projecting sign comes back, I think that might be something we look at potentially reducing, because it is a very large sign. I mean, you can see it here. It's a two-story sign.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
you have this giant banner sign on the side. It's like, what would be more appropriate to the size of the building later on? So.
Okay. I have one initial question. The signage in the windows, was that extent of signage approved administratively initially as well?
I don't believe we've seen any of that come through as temporary signage. And a temporary signage permit is required.
That's considered temporary
It is
signage?
considered temporary signage.
Okay. All right. With that, I'll open it up for any questions or comments from the commission.
Mr. Chair, I have a procedural question. So I know that the planning commission can grant variances for signage. Is that also the case for landmarks?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So we are both commenting on the variance itself as well as citing and design.
Right.
Got it. Thank you.
I have a point of clarification also. So you're saying the applicant did come through the proper channels originally and was approved for what they have now?
They were approved incorrectly for what they have.
And that was the city's.
That's
The city's
city
administrative problem.
Yes.
But the applicant did everything they were supposed to do?
Yes.
Okay.
That wasn't us, by the way, either. We didn't do those original signs. Sorry.
Okay.
But I'd-
Any other commission members with questions or comments? Okay. So this is an unusual situation. I think it's been well reported to us in terms of what transpired here and the length of time that these signs have been in existence. And so a partial recommendation, I think, is to, considering the circumstances, approve the project as presented, including granting the variance for the size of the proposed sign. But we could, I think if we chose, consider a condition that the temporary signs in the windows be presented for approval, and that could be done administratively, I believe. Right, as long as there's no variance required.
And we
All right.
can, as staff, administratively approve the temporary signs because of the.
Okay, and staff can approve those. So with that, I'm open for any member wanting to propose a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to propose a motion. I'd like to approve the signage as presented. I'd like to also approve make a motion to approve the variances required because this is an existing site for signage. I'd also like to recommend, make a motion that we approve any retroactive signage needed. And then finally, that there's a condition for the applicant to submit a permit for the temporary signage.
Okay, very good. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion?
Are we going to limit them to meeting code for 25% window coverage and not go over, or to go over?
I think that's up to staff.
Okay. For guidance.
I had a quick question. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
For the windows, I know that they put that in there so people aren't looking inside at the kids. Now, if they remove that, I would have to talk to them in the sales department to talk to the client. If they remove that, would they still need, because I think those just come off, if I'm not mistaken. So if they want to keep them, we'd have to get it administratively approved. And if they take them off, then we're good, or,
They could put
sorry, I
some
just wanted
kind of,
clarification.
they could put some kind of obscuring film.
Okay,
Well, that's something we'd want to look at as well.
Right.
okay, so anything that they would put on the window, you want me to send it, so just be administratively approved as long as that it didn't need a variance?
There's already existing film on one of the two storefronts.
Uh-huh.
The other one you can see inside, and this, I believe, is also a PRO. So there might be an opportunity for us to discuss different options for those windows to make them more walkable and still maintain the security that they require for the children as well. So that's something that we can talk with.
Staff is willing to work with the applicant to come up with the appropriate replacement sign.
Understood. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Chair, I just want to note that, maybe we ought to look at how I understand like the PR is supposed to invite kind of, so not having, they want transparent windows so that it's more walkable, but we should look at the children and daycare.
This situation, right?
Yeah, these are specific, so.
Okay. With no further discussion on the motion, Dan, please call the roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson? Mr. Dryer?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Okay, get in.
Director Wong?
Yes.
Mr. Sambry?
Yes.
Mr. Trasick?
Yes.
Dr. Williams?
Yes.
And Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
All right. Very good. Look forward to your project going
Damn it.
forward. Okay, we'll move on
Thank you. Bye-bye.
case number 2, case 23104, Caramoo House signage. Would the applicant please identify themselves and introduce your project? Is the applicant here?
Mr. Slias.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay, so who's presenting?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Tony Sias, Caramoo House President and CEO, and who will be presenting today is Sandra Madison, our architect.
All right, very good. Go ahead and proceed with your
Madison's here.
presentation.
Hello. And I have also, I wasn't sure who was presenting today. I didn't know if it was a sign company or whether it was us, but we can do this certainly. Good morning. Again, this is Caramoo House. We presented this, I guess, over 3 years. Was it 3 years ago? I said on this originally on the original cover. This is the site. I think everyone knows where it is. It's on the corner of 89th and Quincy. It says historic. This is on the historic register. It was built in 3 phases back in 1947, 45, 47. Go to the next slide. We're now in phase 3. There's several phases, as you can see here. We right now in Northeast Ohio Regional Storage District, we're doing a project with them where we're doing permeable pavers in the rear. That's the blue is shown there. We've also done interior design of the Jolliff. We've made it more accessible, and we had a phase 2, which included some updates, and you'll see to the rear and enclosed some vestibule. And now we're in, and we also did a chase entrance, it is accessible in the rear of the parking lot, also shown in the pink. We're now on phase 3, which includes again more accessible design on the interior as well as the exterior on Quincy, and also including a plaza front. The project is under construction. We're about at 80% complete. And so we can go to the next slide. This is the site development in the back where we're doing the permeable pavers. And also on the right, you can see where we did the design for the entrance to the park. I'm not sure why I'm going through all this, but I'm just bringing people up who hasn't been there because this has nothing to do with the sign. So next. And that's just more of the parking lot, showing what we did to the rear, to the next slide. This is what was. This is existing conditions in the rear of the parking lot. Next slide. And this is what we've done as far as enclosing the actual vestibule on the parking lot side, making it accessible. Next slide. And this is just showing more of what this phase 3, includes on the interior and also on the exterior. Next slide. And this is just, it was a concept that we were showing what we were doing on the front, which is making the new entrance, extending the entrance so that the vestibule is now deep enough so that people with wheelchairs can get in, and also creating a ramp on the exterior. We also we're doing some improvements on the corner because some of the comments that we always heard was that no one knew what this building was. It says Karamu House. They didn't know whether it was a theater, was it an image? They didn't know what it was actually. A lot of people ride by and don't know what it is. So the intent was to actually create a new sign, pylon sign that would show and indicate what is actually happening. This is actually our arts performing center in school. Next slide. So this is just showing what we did on the interior side of the parking lot side. We enclosed what was an outdoor stage, but also made it so that it's still an outdoor stage. So we have a large overhead folding door. We also created a lobby, extended the exterior lobby, making it accessible. Before you couldn't get in because it was too steep going down into the building from the rear, from the parking lot side. So we now have it so that come in at mid-level and you go up or down into the building to go to the wing that's the administrative wing, which is on the left side, or to the theater's wing, which is on the right side. And also we created a ramp to get into the administrative wing from the parking lot side, which is also where the Chase Bank entrance is. Next slide. These are just renderings of that side. Next slide. Another rendering of the interior. But all of this was approved already, and so like I said, it's 89%, 80% complete. So this is what the existing building looks like on Quincy in 89th. And as you can see, it just says Karamu House. It doesn't really say what happens behind there. No one knew that actually there's actually plays and other performances that go on in there, and also a school which teaches the arts in there as well. So next slide. So the owner wanted to do something to improve that good look. So we extended the vestibule, again, made it accessible from the outside, and designed a pylon sign. Next slide. So these were some of the early renderings that we did. Actually, this is not the first rendering that we presented for the sign. This is the one that we had two signs originally. We had a sign that was actually on the building on the corner of Quincy in 89th. That was also a animated sign similar to what we have in the corner, and then we just had a simple sign, pylon sign that said Karamu House. But Landmarks said we should combine them. Landmarks both in design review said, to try to combine the two signs. So Landmarks did not want it against the building at all. So this came back and they approved this sign. Next sign. And so this is more of a finished rendering of what that sign looks like. And that's it. It's situated on the corner. It's three sides, so you can see the which if you're coming up or down Quincy, or up and down, up or down 89th. So that's why it has three sides. The plaza is like is made with brick pavers, which have been sold, so people have their names on them. It's like a donor type bricks. So, and those are ready to go in. In fact, the foundation for the sign is already in. It's pretty much ready to go. So that's where we are. It's right there on the corner, pretty much at 89th. And yes, we do have lots of greenery that's there. We have bollards there around the plaza as well, and around the sign to protect it from any accidents that may happen. Hopefully never. That may come that way. So that's for protection, and also to sort of define the plaza area.
Okay.
That's all that I have. Did you want to talk a little bit more about the sign, Mike, or Jim?
Carl, do you want to address the issues that were presented to us yesterday, and then I'll kind of go over some items?
Go ahead and describe the sign, and we'll come back to it, please.
Okay, so it's a monument sign with a digital LED reader board on three sides. The three sides, as Sandra had said, gives patrons, whether they're traveling east or west on Quincy, or north and south and east 89th Street, gives them a good view of that sign, so that there's no confusion where the Caramoo House is located at. Also, I think there was an issue with square footage. I believe I forget the square footage, but we would be asking for a variance of around 35.89 square feet per sign. And so that's why we're here this morning.
All right. Does that conclude your presentation?
Tony, did you want to say anything? Did you want to, or you have to leave?
No, I feel like we're excited to hopefully get this approved so that we can communicate what happens here at Caramoo House as it relates to theatrical productions, community programs, and arts education activity here in our building.
All right. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. We'll move on to design review comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was reviewed by the Shaker Square Ludlow Design Review Committee on October 3rd, 2023, and they unanimously voted to recommend approval of the sign and any pending variances required. Also note that they discussed the brightness of the sign at night, appropriateness for Performing Arts Center, and just the allowance for images on the sign.
Okay. We'll move on to staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Caramoo House is zoned residence office C2, the maximum height is 60 feet. There's a 40-foot setback from the center line of Quincy that runs into the property line at approximately 16 feet. Any freestanding sign in front of this setback building line shall be set within a curved planted island or area, a minimum of 100 square feet, and that's per 350.08C. They are proposing a sign off Quincy to be 2.25 feet from the right of way and 3.25 feet off East 89th Street. Since the actual setback is 16 feet from Quincy and 5 feet from East 89th, any sign that falls within the setback would either need to be set within a curb planted island or an area, a minimum of 100 square feet in area, or they will need a variance to place the sign at that location and address the landscaping with existing landscaping. Moving it would not meet their objectives. So one of the biggest concerns that was raised is that the height and proximity, size and the height and proximity to the right of way, which could block sight lines at the corner for vehicles traveling south on East 89th and wishing to turn left or right without specialized signals. There is pedestrian considerations as well to the size. Since theaters are considered a general retail use, and Karamu House is a legal non-conforming use in a residential office district, the standards for signage will apply per 350.19 and 350.14. Dimensions permitted are 25 foot in height, so they do not need a variance for height. It's only 22.5 feet. And 50 square feet in sign face. So there looks to be a total of 85. So they have 14, so they're proposing 85.98 square feet per sign face. So they would need a variance for each sign, specifically.
35 foot
Yeah.
variance.
So there's some requirements. The visibility at intersection signs to be located and designed at so as to maintain a substantially clear view between 2 and 2.5 feet, and 8 feet above grade in a triangle formed by the intersecting street right-of-ways and line 30 feet from the point where the street lines intersect. Then the relation to traffic devices, unless regulated otherwise in the traffic code, a city sign shall not be erected as to obstruct sight lines along any public way or as to obstruct sight lines to traffic control lights, street name signs at intersections or signals at railroad grade crossings. Signs visible from the sight lines along the street shall not contain symbols or words such as stop, go, slow, etc., or red, yellow, or green lights that resemble highway traffic control devices. There's also the changeable copy rules about how much time you have to have a static image and whether you are allowed to have movable images on those as well. And that was a question that came up, and I'm hoping some of our zoning folks could help us with that one. That's still a little outstanding question about whether they can actually put this, they want to show a motion of a play within on the sign, and would that be allowed? We would propose approving the required variances that are needed. Because the signage, that landscaping requirement falls under 350, I believe our interpretation is that the Landmark Commission can grant that variance because specifically it's within the signage code, and that can also be waived as well for more pedestrian. Thank you.
Okay. So the staff recommendation is approving the variances. All right. With that, I will open it up for Landmark's comments and questions. Mr. Edmund?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I realize we're looking at the signage, but vis-a-vis the bollards, given the proximity to the intersection, I would just strongly recommend that those be at least M30 rated bollards at 4 feet on center for the protection of the sign, but also if people are going to be in that plaza for the protection of those people. So I guess that's not part of our motion, but it's just my personal recommendation. M30 bollards at 4 feet. On the sign itself, obviously, yeah, brightness is a concern. And Carl, could you just kind of briefly summarize all the variances that would be required?
Variance would be needing a curb planted island or area minimum of 100 square feet. The size of the sign faces. I believe that was it.
Okay, so there's not a variance from the, you talked about a lot of the sightline geometry, which I didn't quite hear all that. There's not a variance required for that?
I don't believe so. It wasn't, when we submitted this to our zoning staff, they just mentioned it as a consideration, but they did not state that it was a requirement or that a variance would be needed.
Okay, thank you, Carl. So with that, I would also support the proposed project with the required variances. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Edmund.
Mr. Chair, I should also note that the light, this is no residential in the immediate area, so the light brightness may not be an issue at this time as well.
Okay, and I'm just a little confused. Does the applicant have to go through any further zoning consideration or? No, okay, you've solicited comments from zoning.
Yes.
As part of your.
When we get a project like this and we identify it, we will send it over to our colleagues in city planning and say, we need to know exactly, so you guys can be informed, we can speed the process up for people and make sure that we are fully informed so we don't get caught later on down the line. Because like in our previous one, all of a sudden it's 6 years later, oh, we didn't catch this before. So we want to be a little bit more proactive in our reviews this way.
All right, very good. Any further comments or questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair, I just want to say thank you, Mr. Sias, and to the team for just the investment on the Quincy side. I think it's a huge improvement and just a great neighborhood landmark. And the building is a beautiful modern building, so very happy to see all the improvements. My only question is actually about the ADA. ADA access around the signage, and I'm wondering if the applicant would be willing to comment about the placement of signage and ADA access.
All right. The applicant, hear the question from the director.
Especially to the curb crossing the street.
There's a question about ADA accessibility between the curb and the sign and how that's accommodated.
I guess I'm not clear. I mean, as far as this location here, those are existing. They're there already. So as far as the width of the sidewalk, I mean, I guess I'm not clear on what your question is.
Yeah, sorry, Sandra. I was more so thinking like if you're trying to get from the entrance to the curb and you have to maneuver a wheelchair around the sign to get through to the crosswalk.
Basically, the spacing between the handicap
bollards?
ramp and the bollards and the sign.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, if you're at the entrance, I mean, the spacing between is, I believe there is 4 feet. I have to make sure somewhere between 3 and 4. We know that we can get, a wheelchair clearance through.
Okay.
So I think it's 4 feet, but I don't quote me because I don't have the drawings in front of me. But I do know that we took consideration that we can get, there is a clearance of the minimum 32 that's required for accessibility.
Thank you. That's my only question. I support the project and as presented.
All right. So I would like to ask, does the applicant have a response to the concerns raised by Mr. Edmund with regard to the specification for the bollards and the spacing?
No, actually, I believe we specified that those bollards are, I don't know if it's M30, but that they're crash rated. I don't know if that's, they have different ratings on them. I believe M30, that's for 30 miles per hour, right?
It's 30 miles an hour. I think I want to say 15,000 pound vehicle for 30 miles an hour.
Okay, I will check that, what the rating is. I know we asked for crash resistance. I believe they're M30. I know on the parking lot side, it was a little bit less because we weren't thinking people would be going 30 miles per hour in the parking lot. But I know on this side, I believe we did have the M30, but I could definitely check because that was actually designed by our landscape architect who put to design. I think it was M30. We just had that discussion recently.
And what is the spacing?
Oh, okay, let me look that up. Sorry, I have to look at my drawings. I know Sarah's on the line. Sarah, can you help me out? Look at the drawings real quick. Let's see. Bollards.
If you can't find it, conveniently, then I would just suggest that we would include in our motion a consideration that you consider spacing the bollards at 4 feet. I have a question about the hours that the sign will be lit.
The hours, Tony, was it gonna be shut off like between the hours of like 4 a.m.? I mean, I don't know, between 3 a.m. or 2 p.m. to 6 a.m. or something like that, or was it going to go 24 hours? What was your thought on that?
We had made a specific determination as to the hours. So a part of that was going to be informed by our work with the sign designer. And I do see that it could easily be 11, 12 p.m. shut off to, early morning, but we still need to make that determination.
All right. I think that it would be appropriate to include that information with a submission to staff so that we're aware of what the proposed hours of operation for the sign are.
Okay.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
What?
go ahead, Carter.
Mr. Edmund?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that the project be approved as presented, including a recommendation of approval for the variances, with the consideration that the applicant review their bollard spacing and rating, but not a requirement that they come back to present that.
Okay. And would you consider including information about the hours of operation?
Yes. Thank you.
So we have a motion. We have a second. Mr. Tarasik?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second the motion.
All right. Thank you, sir. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Dan, please call the roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Edmund,
Yes.
Councilmember Gray,
Yes.
Director Wong,
Yes.
Mr. Sambry,
Yes.
Mr. Tresick,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
and Mr. Strickland.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the motion passes unanimously.
Wonderful. Looking forward to the continued great progress on Paramount.
Thank you.
Thank
you,
you,
board.
thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the third case, number 23077, Sacred Heart of Jesus Christ School and Rectory, Hope NC Academy window replacement. The applicant, please introduce themselves and tell us about your project.
Sure. Hi, my name is Rick Smith. I represent Hope North Coast Academy, and joining me is Dan Ross with DW Ross. He's the window designer. We're seeking approval to replace the windows on the school only, not the church and not the rectory. There are 88 windows. We'll go through the slide there, and about 65% of them, they're just two different sizes, 40 by 94 and 34 by 96. There are no operable windows on the back of the building, just the front and the two sides. So there, yeah, the first slide there, yeah, so 40 1/4 by 94 1/2. There are 64 of the 88 windows are that 40 by 94 size. And then the other 24, which are on the front of the building, are 34 by 96. We're remaining faithful to the dimensions and the design. And we believe these windows are the original windows for this school. Hard to believe, but they've held up. And Dan, you can jump in at any time. This is the new jam detail. We're looking at replicating the double hung windows. And I think this speaks to the double pane here. Dan, if you want to jump in and kind of comment on that. Hello? Dan?
Hi there.
Yeah, yeah. You just want to comment on the slide that's on the screen there. That's the new jam detail.
So what we're proposing is using an aluminum thermally broken hung window. Bronze in color. The trim around the exterior will be a sand tone. The windows are going to have a low view glass on them for energy efficiency. We're applying a grid to what's existing to the front surface, a simulated look. And then we're applying a simulated transport to the glass surface. We are not choking down any daylight openings or keeping with the sizes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so these, I guess this is the slide of the proposed windows. I guess to the right, those are the smaller windows. Those are the 34 1/2 by 96 on the front. And the one side facing the parking lot, those are 32 of the 64 windows, and those are 40 by 94. Yeah, the applied grids pretty much duplicates the existing design that's there. And from pictures, we think these are the originals, folks. I don't know. We worked with the design committee and then we couldn't come up with anything else. And as you might expect, they don't really operate too well. So we're just looking at replacing them. So that's the windows right there, the 40.25. Yeah, those are the ones that are facing the parking lot side and Krakow, the streets, 32 on each side right there. And we showed the new ones with the applied grids right next to them. And we tried to, again, remain faithful to that design there as well. And these are the windows facing the front of the building. These are 24 windows. Again, remaining faithful to that design and just looking to have some operable windows. So a total of 88 windows here. And we have the coiling on them as well. In addition to the coiling, it's a sandstone coiling. We're looking at just painting and unifying everything. Any of these things that are painted obscure colors, blue and white, all going to be painted sandstone. These are just some vents on the side of the building. The committee helped us with that. We go to the next slide as well. Any trim, these doors, yeah, a huge improvement. Painting those sandstone as well as the transom to kind of unify it and bring everything together. So that was part of our consensus working with the group there. Is there, I don't know if there's another slide. That's it. That's all we have. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
We'll move on to the design review report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This project was reviewed by the East Design Review Committee a few times. It was first seen in July, and the applicant worked with the Design Review Committee to present what we're seeing today, which is multiple grids and changes to make the windows look more like the existing original windows on the building. And that led to the changes for the trim, addition of rails. There was a bit of discussion as the bronze windows appeared to be purchased already, and so kind of working within the windows that they were presenting and had. But overall, they did recommend approval on October 10th for the windows as presented.
All right, thank you very much. And I understand that Councilwoman Mauer is here, and would you like to comment on the project, Councilwoman?
No, this I think is easy breezy. I just hadn't had the chance to sit in on a landmarks commission yet. And so I just took the opportunity to listen in this morning. I learned a lot from Matt Moss's presentation and have enjoyed just understanding more about how you all operate. So very supportive of this work. And I'm sure that everyone in that school will appreciate having new windows. So thank you everybody for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Councilwoman. So we'll move on to staff report.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. This project has been an ongoing discussion at the Design Review Committee level. The largest complication being that it's our understanding that the applicants did purchase the windows prior to seeking a certificate of appropriateness. Through working with the committee and staff, the applicant has developed the approach you see today, which is certainly an improvement over the original proposal, but staff would still like to have seen more appropriate color option. That being said, while this project has come a long way since we first saw it, staff still has a tough time supporting the proposal, specifically just because of the color of the sash and the loss of the actual, the true transom and the bulk of the transom bar from the original windows.
Mm-hmm.
On the filler, typically, historically, they do have all-type fillers. So the window does become darker. Around the window is much brighter. The square feet size model. The transom bar existing is about 4.5 inches, and we are maintaining that 3.5.
You're maintaining the size of the transom bar to match the existing?
Yeah, so our transom bar is 3.5 inches wide. That's correct.
Yeah, the elevation doesn't seem to reflect that.
Like, yeah, that's like, well, so when you look at the bars a lot heavier, the design review did ask that question. The applied grids below that, the horizontals are still existing.
All right, so I'll open it up for questions and comments from the commission.
I have some questions. The divided lights, is that going to be a 3-part divided light, or the simulated divided lights? Does that apply on the outside and the inside of the window, or is that just the between the two pieces of glass?
So it is light on the glass surface to get it to get that. It's going to make a sense more broader.
So I don't know that I followed that.
Is it inside and out?
No, it's on the outside surface of the glass.
Okay. And what is the profile of that? Does that match the profile that currently exists?
It's close to what it is, but that is actually wood there. So it's like a trapezoidal flat with the 4 inches coming down.
Understand. So it'll match the putty and the wood profile of the historic building or the historic window? Okay.
It's not tape applied to the surface of the window.
Something to a simulated divided light.
What, it's a simulated divided light can be simulated several ways.
Your microphone's breaking up a little bit. It's hard to hear what you're saying.
So it's simulated divided light applied to the glass surface.
What's the profile of the simulation?
It's a what we refer to as a trapezoid or a putty. It's flat across the front surface and it's tapered back 40.
What's the depth? What's the depth of that mutton?
Good question. The width is 7/8. That is maybe a 1/2 inch.
I think I would recommend the detail of that submitted to staff for approval.
Detail of the mine.
Yeah.
Oh, the simulated divided light. The mine. Yes.
Further comments from the commission? Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to see the blue doors and trim being replaced by the sandstone. I think that's going to have a much more elegant look to the building. I have a question and maybe a concern about the application to simulate the transom. From the looks of the photos, you say the transom is the same width, correct? As what's existing? My concern is the depth because, the shadows play differently with the transom and the original windows because the transom bar is a little thicker and a little deeper. And I don't get that in the new replacement windows. I'm wondering if they're the same depth as the other ones, or if they mimic the original thickness and depth of the transom.
Okay.
Somebody had jumped the gun and ordered the windows previously. And we're trying to bring this thing into where it's acceptable, but the customer can do it. One of the things that the design review wants to think that the doors and all this blue building wasn't in their budget, and now they got back into the budget to do that. So we're really the best players if they can do as far as budget wise.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble hearing you. You're breaking up quite a bit.
Yeah, Dan, I think they're just looking at the dimensions of the transom head. And we've got the transom rail, which is field applied, and the transom head remaining faithful to the 3 inches, the column widths, etc. But it's obviously 3-dimensional. The transom head. Just what are the dimensions? I guess that's kind of what they're looking for here. Is it going to be similar or just something applied? You said it's a trapezoid type.
It doesn't have the exact same depth as what's there.
Okay. So the same depth. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Okay, so it's the same width, the same depth. It's just the picture doesn't really
do it justice. You can't really tell.
I understand.
Yeah, I get it.
All right. Well, those are my questions. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. I'm going to ask the applicant to explain why these windows were pre-ordered before any permitting process was initiated.
You want me to go?
No, I can go. Sorry, my phone went off there. Basically, we in our RFP we called for permits, and we had no idea that we had to go through design review. So we proceeded to install windows the same size, and just with the operable windows, we had no idea that we had to go through the committee. So we worked with the contractor, which is Elite and DW Ross. So once we found out we had to go through committee, we did our best to work with them. But we're just the customer. We just want our windows to work, and for our kids. So that's all.
And I'm the window supplier, so if you're putting the order in, I assume that everybody was the same page. So like you said, Elite.
I mean, in our RFP, we call for a permit, absolutely. So we were surprised.
If your contractor initiated the permitting process with building and housing, they would have made him aware immediately of the landmark submission requirement.
Correct.
And I think he didn't think that's we were trying to get the windows in before school. Yeah.
So do you know if your contractor is registered with the city of Cleveland?
Yes.
So he should have known what the permitting procedure
I
involved.
don't think he thought it was a historical building. Yeah.
There is a pending permit. So
But the windows are ordered.
Yes, they've submitted for permit. So
there should have been an onus on the owner school to notify the contractor that they were a designated landmark and say there should be some considerations that they should know that they're in this building that will require a higher level of review.
You know, we did one other building, we're replacing windows in 4 buildings. The first building, which is over at West Park, did not require, we got the permit and it did not require landmarks or anything like that. It's of a similar age. So it's kind of hit or miss. We already installed those windows and I got the permit for that. So this was the first hurdle and the first we'd heard of this. We have our permit, we secured it, we're finished with that project, and lo and behold, we go to this project and we find out that this is a landmark building and the other was not. So that's how we learned about it.
Weren't there other permits for this site that were required for some demolition or something?
No, nothing.
That was a different project.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's always problematic to consider projects. I feel like a lot of concessions are expected to be made here on the part of landmarks, and if this project had been presented appropriately, we'd be looking at a different project. So the owner has to bear that in mind.
The owner did work with the PBC to Happy Media.
Mr. Chair, this might be a good opportunity that the owner look at all of their properties and make sure that whether they are designated within a landmarks district, et cetera, and make plans for that if they're going to do more projects to improve, and we would encourage that. And
We have the next one coming up is going to be Broadway, Mount Pleasant, and that is through the same Central Southeast Design Review. So we'll take a different course of action with that. The fourth property is at Hope North Coast, which is by Detroit. That we already have the permit for that, so that does not go through design. So when we heard of this, we immediately changed gears, and our submittal for Broadway Mount Pleasant, we'll take a different approach to that, and certainly work with the committee and landmarks on that. So I apologize.
Landmark certainly recognizes and appreciates the capital investment in this historic structure, and we appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions from the commission?
I know there was some issues with the color. Just to clarify, is there a brown color for the window and then the sandstones for the trim? Is that correct?
Wait, you could see that the
Yes,
the
sash browns. Yeah.
So they added the sandstone.
And so we have issue with the sandstone color.
Or the bronze.
Staff felt that the bronze color wasn't necessarily appropriate for a school building.
Okay.
It feels more the commercial
color, not the
industrial.
sandstone.
Yeah, the sandstone color, I think it works with what the compromise is with the having to keep the color of the window the same, but having a not necessarily white like it currently is, but having some sort of more unified color feels more appropriate.
And have the windows already been manufactured and delivered, or just ordered?
Unfortunately, ordered and delivered. So, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Seeing no further questions or comments, I'll open the floor to a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented, with stipulation that a detail of the profiles of the divided light, the simulated divided light muttons will be submitted, and a profile of the transom detail profile will be submitted to staff for review. Because the window's already on site, there's no comment on colors and size.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sandberry. We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll Second.
This is Alan, I'll second.
Dan, you can. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Dan, please call the roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Edmond,
Yes.
Councilmember Gray,
Yes.
Director Wong,
Yes.
Mr. Sandberry,
Yes.
Mr. Trosick,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
and Mr. Strickland.
No.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes by a vote of 8-1.
All right. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you all. We'll look forward to working with you on Broadway, Mount Pleasant.
Yeah, we look
Before
forward
the
to
windows
that.
are ordered. Thanks.
Right.
Okay, bye.
Very much look forward to that. Good luck with your project. The next case is case number 23082, Little Italy Historic District, 1902 East 123rd Street, renovation and new construction.
Mr. Chair, as a point of order, before we hear this case, we should untable it.
All right. Since this project was tabled on the 12th, I'll entertain a motion to take it off the table.
I'll make a motion to remove this item from the table.
All right. We have a motion, a second.
Second.
Mr. Edmond will second. Dan, please call the roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Edmond,
Yes.
Councilwoman Gray,
Here.
Director Wong,
Yes.
Mr. Sandberry,
Yes.
Mr. Trosick,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
and Mr. Strickland.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the motion passes.
All right. Project's been taken off the table. The applicant can introduce themselves and reintroduce your project.
Hello again, everybody. This is Ryan Grass of Grassroots Architecture. Thanks for having us back. Thanks for needing to untable us. So when we last spoke with you, there were essentially 3 items left on the table. We had some pretty candid and straightforward discussions relative to design and position and sizing and everything. And at the risk of speaking for Landmarks, I think the project was reasonably acceptable. But when we did left, we were charged with considering 3 things. One was a tree preservation plan. The other was a discussion with Lieutenant James as the plans examiner for the fire department. And third was the inclusion of some windows, or at least some investigating some inclusion of the windows on the north side of the building. So as a quick reminder, well, first we looked into all those. I'll speak on each of those independently. But as a reminder, the site plan you see in front of you is oriented, so north is up on the page. So the windows we're discussing are the ones kind of closest to the neighbor's driveway and their fence. When you originally saw it, there was frankly no windows on that side. And we had actually kind of loaded some of the programmatic elements of the plans against that wall, knowing that the close proximity of the neighbors and the fence didn't make it very attractive. But adding windows was a perfectly reasonable suggestion, so we moved forward on that. And again, as a reminder, the on the left of that site plan are the 2 new homes. They're townhouses, but they function kind of as single-family homes. And to the right is the existing home. The existing home we're just playing with aesthetically. The 2 on the left are new construction, in addition to the drive and the landscaping and stuff. So let me start with Lieutenant James. He is our contact at the fire department, and he's the fire department's plans examiner. We worked with him a couple other times. It's frankly part of the process of getting the permit. It's been our experience that we submit for a permit, we get a response, adjudication letter or an approval, and the suggestion is you still have to go talk to the fire department. So we have a discussion with Lieutenant James, walk through it with him, and then he signs off or has some comments. It's a little bit early for having that discussion with him, and the only reason I'm suggesting that is because he's not interested in talking with us. We've reached out via email at least 3 times since we last talked. I guess that's been 2 weeks now. And we've left numerous voicemails. I'm not suggesting he's not responsive because he's not doing his job. I just would like, my assumption is, and I think it's accurate, the guy's busy. He's the one's plans examiner for the fire department. And he knows that part of the process is through the permitting. And he's got that checks and balance. So I think he relegates us to second tier to-do list because he knows we're in, at least based on my emails and voicemails, that we're at landmarks, and he knows he's got a stopgap at the permitting process to know that things won't get by him that aren't safe based on his perspective. So the short answer on the fire department, we've reached out and he's been reasonably unresponsive. The tree preservation plan, we did talk to a landscape architect and a tree preservation specialist. We had all the trees inventoried on the site, documented the ones greater than, I think, 4-inch diameter trunks. We had that all documented and surveyed, put together in kind of the data set about, and positioned on the site. So long and short of it, there are, we offered that to Jessica just a couple days ago when it was complete. The long and short of it is, it's no surprise to us, and it's pretty consistent with what we suspected earlier in the project. There's 9 trees on the site that have a trunk of diameter 4 inches or more. All but one of those are going to have to come down. They are in the footprint of a building or in the footprint of the drive or close enough to the building that the excavation of the basement will compromise their health. And that's, and I'm afraid that's just all there is. Now, the one saving grace is if you can see a silver lining in this storm cloud, is that the one we are saving is at the street. So we'll have a tree at the front of the property that is existing and will remain. But I'm not thrilled to say that the balance of the trees will frankly have to go. So we've prepared and documented what we need to. That's offered to, I believe was sent to Jessica, and it'll be part of our building permit, that submittal as it's required to be. And so that's where we're at there. Finally, let's talk about the windows on the north side of the 2 buildings at the rear of the property. We've updated the presentation you have in front of you. We've updated the plans and the elevations and the renderings. There you go. Perfect. Thank you. That is the north side of the building. The before picture of this is the current design with the new windows. The before picture of this, just imagine all these windows gone and it all being siding. So what we did was we strategically added windows in living areas, bedrooms, and on the lower left, there's kind of one centered in the wall. That's at a stair landing. That kind of explains its odd position on the building. But otherwise, we added 8 new windows in what we think are appropriate spots relative to the interior. And finally, we had to kind of do a dance of the windows and the proximity to the property. We're just over 3 feet away from the property line, so we're only allowed a certain amount of openings on this wall without having to push the building back away from it upwards of 2 or 3 feet. So we're within that criteria. I believe it's 10% of the wall can be open and unprotected, and that's where we're at now. We're below that threshold, so we won't have any non-code compliance openings on the wall. So that's the elevation itself. And again, I'm sorry, I don't know that I explained, but you have to kind of put those 2 elevations together to illustrate the entire length of the 2 new townhomes. And if you want to flip forward on a couple other slides, we've got some exterior imagery, if you will, of those windows. The other elevations you see here were unchanged. I think we kind of discussed our way through not hating any of those. Oh, that's the materials. None of the materials have changed on the building relative to our last discussion. So that's what we have. It was 3 items: windows, tree preservation, and the fire department. I hope that we've addressed one, and the other two, frankly, we're kind of on our way through those, and our goal is to get those buttoned up, of course, prior to the release of permits, because they won't let us have permits without addressing those two items. All right, I look forward to your thoughts. Thanks.
All right. So that completes your presentation. Did this go back to design review?
Oh, no, we did not go. For those windows, we did not.
Okay. And staff report?
Thank you. Yes, staff feels that overall this is an appropriate proposal. As we stated at the last meeting, we do prefer the use of more hardy board instead of vinyl siding on the rear portion of the project. As Ryan said, there's been a lot of discussion about the tree preservation plan and fire. But I guess, our feeling is that since the tree preservation plan is really more about figuring out where else they're going to plant trees, or where, if they're going to pay into a fund, it's more mitigation. There's not a lot of flexibility to move the building a few feet to save a tree. So, given that it's unlikely to change the plan for the site, I guess staff would just recommend that any proposal or any approval given by the commission include a stipulation that a certificate of appropriateness not be issued by Landmark staff until a copy of the tree preservation plan has been submitted to staff.
And how about the fire department?
The fire, we're kind of leave that to fire.
Okay.
So that takes
That
care of
doesn't have to
itself.
be
in its
part of
own.
a stipulation as part of our.
Yeah, a permit can't be issued without that approval, so we feel like that's a good safeguard there.
Very good.
If fire finds an issue, they'll let them.
Yeah, that they'll have to deal with. Okay. All right. With that, I will open it up for commission questions and comments.
To the chair, this is Director Huang. I think adding 2 units in the back is appropriate, and it's set far off the street. So I am 50-50 on the vinyl and hardy board. I think using hardy board is always a nicer option, just to enhance the marketability of the product. I do think that regarding the trees, I took a look at the Google Maps, and I mentioned this last time that Lakeview Cemetery is just right across the street and has a substantial tree cover, and therefore provides a lot of that oxygenation that we'd like to see, and kind of act as the lungs. So I am personally comfortable moving ahead with the plan as presented.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions from the commission? Ms. Sanderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noticed that you're going to have some yard area and some green area. I was wondering if you were planning to plant some trees in those spaces. Otherwise, I think it's a nice project. I agree, a hardy would be superior, of course, to the vinyl. But yeah, please let me know if you plan on planting some trees in the areas, the beds, and green areas. Thank you.
Sure. And yes, of course, we do have the advantage of kind of a front yard for the first new construction and a rear yard for the rear new construction. Our process is Andrew from Gold Key Builders engages a landscape architect and a contractor as the project is under construction, and I can guarantee you that some trees will be planted in those 2 spots. And in addition, we're going to add some landscaping to the street. If you recall, there's actually in the front right image, the upper right image, you'll see that there's a new patio and some landscaping there. So our goal is really through the design of, in lieu of packing this place with townhouses, which in our opinion wasn't appropriate, was allowable based on code. Our goal was to create that green space, and I think we'll just add to that with some trees and greenery.
Thank you. I think that's a great idea.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Edmond?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Ms. Anderson asked my one question. In addition to that, I just want to add that I think the additional windows are a significant improvement to the building, and otherwise support the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further comments?
I have some questions.
Mr. Stanberry?
Typically, the standing seam metal roof wouldn't be appropriate for this neighborhood for a historic district. So I was wondering if that was just a design decision, or is it because the pitch of these locations doesn't allow for an asphalt shingle?
Yeah, it's good eye. It's the pitch. We're below a 412 pitch, and the shingle manufacturers won't warranty their product when we go below that depth. So it's a function of the pitch and the water penetration.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? I'll add mine here. I really like this project. I think the addition of the windows on the north elevation are a great improvement. And I think I stated in the last meeting that having the hardy plank on the renovated existing portion of the building in the front really adds to the exterior presentation of that structure, and that given that the new construction is so far back in the lot, I personally don't have a problem with the vinyl siding back there. Seeing no other questions or comments, I'll open the floor to a motion. Ms. Anderson?
Oh,
You weren't muted, so I thought you may have had your hand raised.
I don't think I have a good list of any
Stipulations?
stipulations, right?
Do you want to help us out here?
I'll try to, I don't know if I got everything, but, Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the project as presented on the condition that, the tree preservation plan be submitted and approved prior to the issuing of certificate of appropriateness. And what else was there? That was it.
Yeah, fire is going to be dealt with on their
Yeah.
own, so we don't have to stipulate that.
Yeah, that completes my motion.
All right, so we have a motion with stipulations. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, Ms. Anderson will second. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Dan, please call the roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Edmond,
Yes.
Director Wong,
Yes.
Mr. Sandberry,
Yes.
Mr. Trasick,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
and Mr. Strickland.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the motion passes unanimously.
Great. All right, so you understand the stipulations, and the certificate will not be released until that tree preservation plan is presented and approved. But we look very much forward to completion of your project.
I understand. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll move on to the fifth case number 23093, Lorraine Avenue Historic District, West 45th Street, renovations and new construction. Would the applicant please introduce themselves and update us on your project?
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Chad Curtis from My Place Group. We're back. We've got a plan that we went through the Ohio City Design Review last week, and we received their approval with some contingencies. We submitted it as we had originally submitted to that board today to you. We made a lot of improvements. I think most recently we saw this board as a massing kind of concept study. From there, we've taken it to a full drawings, or not full drawings, but full set of plans so you can see what's going on the site. And I think it's made a lot of leaps and bounds. We've really incorporated almost all of the feedback we've received from the different boards, as much as we can from any other community feedback as well. And happy to show you what we've got and and receive some feedback today as well.
Great, please proceed.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Denver Broker, principal with BOCON, for the architects for this new iteration of this plan. So this is the aerial showing the site. It's a very irregularly shaped site with a part of it facing Lorraine, part on 44th, and a piece on 45th. Next. This aerial view, the red to the far left is where our site is. And one of the things as we looked at the historic district, there's been a lot of concern about the proposed height of at least one of the buildings on the site. And there is precedent within the historic district and in this immediate part of the historic district where larger scale buildings coexist well with lower scale buildings. It's just a natural evolution within this historic district on the Lorraine corridor and in other parts of the Ohio City Historic District. Next. These are examples of both new and historic buildings within the immediate area that are of taller size than 2- and 3-story buildings that might be adjacent to them. Next. So we get a little closer to the site so we can understand the context. Lorraine at the bottom, to have a commercial enterprise there to the left and a gas station to the right along Lorraine. And then north of this site on 44th, single family houses. To the north of the site on 45th, the first property to the north is a commercial property with a small building at the east end of the site and a rather large empty parking staging area in front. Next. So I have ground level views of the site. Upper right, or on Lorraine looking east. See the commercial property there in the foreground, and the white building with the gabled roof is a historic building on the site, the front portion of which we're retaining in the new concept. Lower left, we're on 44th. This is the green area with the one tree is our site. The single family house in gray to the right remains and is the first property north of our site. Upper left, we're on 45th. And here we're looking at a large undeveloped empty lot. Next. So the new plan, I believe this was introduced to you very conceptually. It is quite different than the previous more developed plan in front of Ohio City Design Review Committee twice now. The basic concept is that there are 3 independent buildings now. Building 1 on 45th is a 3-story apartment building, walk-up type, with parking on the east side. In the middle, facing Lorraine, we have building number 2. This is a 5-story building, 4 stories of apartments above a ground level of parking, lobby space on Lorraine, and a small retail area in dark blue that you see there, which is the part of the historic building that we're retaining in the development. And then finally, to the east, on 44th, we have building number 3, another 3-story building, this one with parking on the ground level and 2 floors of apartments above. Next. This is the second floor, just shows the disposition of apartments in the 3 buildings. And then it stacks similarly as we go up through the buildings. Next. This is the top floor of building 2, showing the setback. We have a setback on the south face on Lorraine, where we have an amenities space and terrace open to all the residents of this new community. Next. This is a bit of a zoning diagram that shows the setbacks around the building on all the streets. I think the thing that we'll point out here, defining feature of the site plan that is different from the original and was developed over a period of time with Ohio City, is the access alley to the north that connects 45th to 44th. Originally, we planned it as a two-way access, and then based on some conversations with the Ohio City Design Review Committee and looking at how traffic patterns worked, we made it one way from west to east. So entry will be off of 45th, exit off of onto 44th for this drive alley. You'll notice that all three buildings are set back a minimum of 28 feet or more. Building 2 particular has a irregular north face. So while we're showing a 28-foot building setback at the furthest north portion, most of that building, or 2/3 of it, is 40 feet, 41 feet from that property line. Next. This shows kind of an axonometric of the three buildings and how they're put on the site. Also have all of the counts in terms of numbers of units. We're looking at 87 total apartments, which is significantly less than was previously proposed. And total parking, that says 48 spaces. All of which is integrated into the three buildings. Next. We're going to go through a series of renderings. This is before. We're on 44th looking south. Next. This is building 1, 3-story walk-up building, marked by a series of gabled bays that reflect the historic nature of the street in terms of a rhythm of gabled fronts on the homes. We're looking at a combination of two colors of, in this case, fiber cement siding on the front of this building, some balconies. We'll go next. A little closer. We've worked to develop a character that's consistent with many of the wood frame buildings in the district, including trim details. So you'll notice that we've included significant trim around the windows, at the corners, at the rakes, and at the gable lines. And then if we move to the next rendering, a little close-up of one of the entrances. So you can see a little bit of extra detail here in terms of a fiber cement panel and trim board to set up each of the entrances into this building. So we think that's very much in keeping with the character of the single family homes that are on the street. Next. So now we're on Lorraine looking east. Next. So here to the left, you see the edge of building 1, its south face, just behind the commercial property. And then we see building 2 fronting Lorraine, woven around the portion of the historic building that we've retained, and then moving back to the north, following the site property lines. Next. Here we are on Lorraine. We adopted a fairly traditional approach to the face of this building. One, it's brick, and about a third of the way back to the north, also brick. A very rhythmic punched window fenestration pattern that is very much like a traditional building, a little bit more contemporary window style with fewer mullions, but all in all, very contextual piece. And the building next door, the historic building, retained, and with a few small adjustments in terms of paint. Next. This is a little bit close up so you can see the before And the after, we've removed the decorative metal shutters and screens and gave it a more appropriate color for the trim. Next. Now we're on Lorraine again, looking west. Next. So to the right, you're seeing building 3 on 44th, and we're seeing the east face of building 2 behind the service station. See how the brick returns along a significant portion of building 2. And then there's a continuation of a rhythmic punched window fenestration pattern along the length of that building. Building 3 to the right, picking up again, similar in character to building 1 with the gabled roof elements. Next. Now we're on 44th, looking west. The black mass to the right is the existing single-family home you saw in the earlier photographs. And then our new building stretching along the north access drive. Combination of fiber cement siding on this face and fiber cement panel and trim on the projecting bay. We will note that the last review, Ohio City found the little brackets on the bays a little distracting and maybe not necessary. We concur there may be a little too minimal if they were to exist, but perhaps aren't necessary. Next. We're 44th looking south. Next. And then we see building 3 added into the context with the rest of 44th. And again, we believe that it fits well within the character of the existing buildings and certainly creates a new kind of buffer between the gas station and the existing single-family homes. Next. We're going to go through a series of elevations. These are intended to, one, show the height and give some context around the proposed materials. What you're seeing here is how it was presented to Ohio City Design Review Committee at the last meeting with a combination of fiber cement siding on some elevations, vinyl on the others, and vinyl windows throughout. During the course of that meeting, the committee approved it based on making all siding product fiber cement and all windows something other than vinyl. The developer would like you to review it as it was presented, and perhaps you might have a different opinion in the extent of siding and window specification changes. So I'll walk through what we submitted originally. This is building 1. We're on 45th. This entire elevation would be fiber cement panel, fiber cement trim, vinyl windows. Next. This is the west elevation of building 1. This faces building 2. This went through a couple of iterations, this being the latest, with a modulation of the length of the building with the vertical accents of the white siding and some additional detail above the overhead doors. This elevation was proposed in vinyl siding with AZAC and fiber cement trim. So the original proposal was that we were not using traditional minimal profile vinyl trim on the building, and it was amplified, made more traditional by using AZAC and fiber cement products that made it seem, or certainly made it more contextual in terms of traditional detailing. Next. This is the north elevation of building 1. The small gable element is where we returned the fiber cement siding, And then the balance of that elevation was proposed in vinyl. Next. This is the south elevation. The same approach was taken. The small gabled element gave us a natural return for the fiber cement product, and then transition to vinyl for the balance of the elevation. Next. Now we're on Lorraine with building 2, south elevation. This is all brick, some aluminum storefront up at the top for the amenities terrace, and at the first floor for the higher lobby and entry spaces. Next. This is the north elevation. This building, we had proposed a brick wainscot at the base that you can see there next to the overhead door, and then a combination of vinyl lap siding in the lighter taupe color, topped with the 5th floor being a board and batten look with a vinyl siding product. We purposefully used these more muted, darker tones. We felt that given the size of the building, it was appropriate for the mass of it. The lighter colors didn't seem appropriate for a building of this scale. Again, using fiber cement and AZAC trim on all the windows and details that you see here. Next. This is the east elevation, the length of the building, where you see the taupe vinyl siding is modulated between each vertical bank of windows with a vertical trim, and kind of a nice rhythm that's created along the building's length. Again, the same disposition of materials with board and batten vinyl at the 5th floor, lap siding floors 2 through 4. Next. And then the west elevation, same kind of detailing material approach. Next. This is building 3, the north elevation, which faces the drive alley. Here on this elevation, there was a small return of fiber cement up to the first bay on the left, and then around the first 3 overhead doors. The balance of the elevation was proposed in vinyl siding with the same AZAC and fiber cement trim we proposed on all the other buildings. Next. And then the south elevation facing the service station. To the right, the fiber cement, the first dark bay to the right was all fiber cement, and then transitioned to vinyl for the balance of the elevation. Next. And then the elevation facing 44th, this all in fiber cement with the details as you see. Next. And then the west elevation facing building 2 in vinyl. Next. This we put into this deck just to help stage the conversation about materiality. The building on the left is an historical home with traditional wood lap siding and painted. The image on the right is a newer development that was all done in vinyl with amplified trim at the windows and at the porch and the eaves. So it's taking vinyl and then elevating it in terms of being true to traditional details. That is what we proposed with our project. Next. This is the palette of materials, the colors that are being proposed, whether they're fiber cement or vinyl, and the associated brick. Next. Landscaping plan. The site does have a few trees on it. All of them will be removed. The only one that we may be able to retain I can't commit to that right now, is that there is one street tree on 45th Street. And if we can save that, then we will. It's about the location of the middle tree that you see on 45th. Otherwise, everything you see here will be new landscaping brought to the site at the north perimeter along Drive Alley, a combination of trees and smaller screening shrubs. To the south of Building 3, some evergreen and relatively narrow deciduous trees along that side to create a visual transition, if you will, from the service station to the residential. And the same on the other perimeters of Building 2. Next. Exterior lighting, we've taken an approach that's as residential in character as we could, still make it safe. So you see two wall-mounted light fixture types, upper right being lantern style, and that's represented by the small blue squares around the site, and then the angular wall-mounted area light that is marked by the orange circles on the site. So any lights facing Lorraine, 44th, 45th are lantern style, enough of them to make that part of the sidewalk pleasant or a walking area. And then where there's a little bit of a dog relief area on the east side of Building 2, area lights to make it a little more safe. The same with the drive aisles between Buildings 1 and 2. Next. And that is presentation. Happy to answer any and all questions, details related to the proposed development.
All right. Thank you very much for that presentation. We'll move on to design review comments.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. This was most recently seen by the Ohio City Design Review Committee on October 19th. Several of the members restated their ongoing issues and concerns with the overall scale and massing of the proposal. There was also a lot of discussion about materiality on the different areas of the projects. A motion was made to approve with the conditions that all 3 buildings be hardy siding instead of vinyl, with the exception of the east or rear elevation of Building 1, which faces the parking area. There were also stipulations that the applicant return with specific product selections and considerations, that the applicant take a look at the bracket or corbel details and the awnings over the doors. This motion had a split vote of 3-3, so it did not pass. So a second motion was made to recommend approval of the project with the stipulation that all the vinyl siding be hardy instead, and that all vinyl windows be changed to a different, higher quality material. And that motion passed by a vote of 4-2. So the local design review committee did pass it with the stipulation that essentially there'd be no vinyl on the project.
All right. And I'm aware of significant public comments on the project. So do we have a summary of public comments, or?
Don't let me
Looks like
go.
we have Nate.
Okay. Mr. Lowell, if you want to comment on public engagement.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Landmarks Commission. Nate Lowell with Ohio City Incorporated. I'm just here to provide some community process and input throughout this project. So our community engagement plan calls for developers and businesses to engage with the Ohio City neighborhood to ensure that the entire community is informed about changes taking place with as few barriers as possible. This includes our monthly community meetings on third Tuesdays of most months, facilitated by OCI at Urban Community School. And in an effort to make these meetings as inclusive as possible, we provide food, transportation, and childcare for those who attend. Additionally, this meeting is live streamed and recorded and then uploaded to our sites such as YouTube and Facebook. For certain projects, OCI asked that this information be hosted on Corbinize, which I believe you're all familiar with. It's our public engagement website. Corbinize allows interested residents to follow the project, learn about the timeline, get direct updates, post their questions and feedback, and also submit public comment to the city. My Place Group has engaged with this process and undertaken the following efforts that we're aware of. They presented at the February 21st community-wide meeting, and they posted their project on Corbinize on February 22nd of this year. All subsequent plans have been posted to the same site. All these public meetings have been recorded and uploaded to Corbinize with the information, as well as how to submit your comments to the governing bodies. I believe they also hosted 2 meetings in the evening at their offices with residents on March 15th and April 27th. And we also, along with Councilmember McCormack, hosted a meeting at the OCI office on April 6th of 2023 with 18 of the nearby impacted neighbors and relayed this feedback to the developer. This project has evolved substantially in the time that it's gone through the process. The same concerns have been raised consistently by a lot of the residents nearby regarding parking, traffic safety on West 44th and West 45th Streets, and the height of the middle building as it steps towards the 2-family district. However, there's been support for some of the changes the developer has made in recent iterations of the project from some nearby residents and businesses in the neighborhood, specifically calling out the increase in density and the restored historic building. Overall, our role in this process has been facilitating community engagement, which we feel like has been fulfilled, but we do not have a position on the matter of the development itself. Thank you for allowing me to comment.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lowe. And I understand that the council member McCormick is not available to attend the meeting, but I believe that he's established support for the project previously. All right, so we'll move on to staff report.
Jessica has more public comment to summarize.
Okay.
So we received significant public comment for the 2 times that the project was reviewed by the Ohio City Design Review Committee, the September 21st and October 19th meetings, for their deadline, which was the Tuesday before their scheduled Thursday meetings. And we also received significant public comments since the October 19th meeting, before our Tuesday deadline for this particular meeting. And 23 comments received for the September meeting, 30 for the October meeting. So this is pictured comments, or folks that submitted comments for the Design Review Committee meetings. 11 of those comments were supportive of the project, 42 were non-supportive for the project. And then in the past 5 days, week, we've received 42 comments. 8 of them were supportive, 34 were non-supportive for the project. And of the total 95 comments that were received, the supportive comments reference the positives of increasing development and density along Lorraine and along that corridor, and infilling the empty and unused lots along the commercial corridor. So a lot of them are very positive towards that. Comments that were not supportive of the project reference deep concern for traffic and safety around the site for pedestrians and for vehicles, the development, zoning, and approval process, and the scale and massing for the residential streets that will be impacted, and noted issues with the materials, the vinyl materials proposed, and the height as it goes into a residential district.
All right, thank you very much. Now we'll move on to staff report.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff has a lot of mixed feelings about the proposal, and among the 3 of us, there's no real overall consensus. There's still some concerns about the scale, massing, and materials. We certainly prefer the proposed plan to the proposal we saw earlier this year that had all the units in one building, but we're still struggling a bit with the issue of how visible this project will be from either direction when traveling down Lorraine. We do all agree that the Lorraine building should step down a bit as it engages the residential district to the rear. And given that the corners of this block are likely to remain undeveloped for the foreseen future, we feel that special care should be taken when dealing with this challenging site. The Lorraine Avenue building, when viewed from the front, is fine, but the sides are what will be seen more often and for long distances when traveling down Lorraine in either direction. This would be a great infill project if the corners of this block had more substantial buildings on them, but that's not the case. So we're stuck wondering if we should support this project or let these lots that have been vacant for so long sit for a while longer and wait for another proposal to present itself. The architecture is not offensive and it's not inappropriate either, but it's also not as dynamic, ornate, or the high level design as other of the more monumental buildings on Lorraine. The design review committee meeting, one committee member made the comment that if the scale of this project is being compared to the more monumental buildings on Lorraine, like the 3500 Lorraine there at Fulton and Lorraine, the old Antiques in the Bank, Fifth Third Bank branch, then it should be compared to them in terms of style and quality as well, and not just scale. We don't disagree with this. So there are a few details that staff felt needed some attention. Specifically, we feel that the windows on the Lorraine facade of Building 2 should be double hung sash to give it a more residential feel. We also note that the site plan lacks sidewalks or ways for a pedestrian to maneuver throughout the site while not inside a building. So basically, if you're in that building on 44th Street and not the unit, I guess there's no way other than just walking through the driveway to get from those units to the street. We also have some questions about snow and trash removal, as well as the location and accessibility of the bike racks. Also feel that the 44th building should address 44th more, potentially with a front door entrance there. And as been stated numerous times, this is a very challenging site. It straddles two historic districts, the Lorraine Avenue Commercial Historic District and the Ohio City Historic District, which is much more residential in scale and feel. So all that being said, staff is torn on the question of whether this project should be approved. But I guess just one more question and more of a curiosity. The context photos that were in the presentation, Denver, that showed the porches and materials, are those both in the neighborhood, or where are those from?
No, they're not necessarily in the neighborhood. They're just simply precedent in terms of the one on the right definitely is not.
So I was going to say I didn't
May I
recognize
add something? May I add something? The one on the right is on Scranton.
No, it's outside of the state. It's completed by another developer that traditionally
The one
uses
on
vinyl
the left
siding.
is on Scranton. The historic house.
Oh,
Thank you. That's all staff has. Yeah.
all right. Thank you. I'm going to first ask the applicant if they wanted to address any of the comments raised by staff with regard to some of the specific points they raised before I open it up to the commission for questions and comments. Specifically, the windows on the south elevation of Lorraine being more traditional double hung, and the accessibility issues that were addressed.
Absolutely. So I guess in terms of the windows on Lorraine, switching them to a double hung, that's something we wouldn't have an issue with. We've got our 41st building, which actually has a mixture of long or tall windows on the existing 3928 building, and then the new portion of it has double hungs. So switching this new portion of the building to the double hungs is no issue with us. Interior sidewalks, I'm not sure which slide would be best, but if you maybe could pull the one that looks from 45th, that one right there. So this comment about access from the buildings out to 44th was asked in the first design review with Ohio City Incorporated. And what we've done here is along the front of that building, or I guess along the drive side of it, the gray is a sidewalk. There is no perfect way to cross this path, but this sidewalk essentially would connect through the front of those buildings, right out those entries, and then that would allow the back of the middle building to access it as well. But generally, that's the access point. Snow and trash. If we could jump to an aerial of the site, one of those site plans, or maybe the original site plan. The one that showed maybe all the setbacks and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, that's so our trash is in the north of the main building. We have actually two trash locations. One is inside of the main building where the large building will have a trash chute with a compactor that's in the garage. We pull it out the day of. Trash actually won't even need to go to the sidewalk. They will be able to pull it right inside of the drive area. Trash company comes in, picks it up and takes it out. A similar operation to other buildings we have with trash chutes and compactors. The trash area for the two smaller buildings is in that north corner right there. This picture doesn't show the neighboring properties, what's right up against it. But if you were to look at this trash and immediately to the right of it, that is the back of the garage of that house that's off of 44th. So it's really, no one sees it, no one's there. There's no yard next to it. And then north of us is a commercial site. It's mostly a parking lot with a commercial building that backs right up to that area. So we're not putting trash next to anybody's home or anywhere someone hangs out in their backyard. It's generally a pretty indescript, good location for trash, which is a necessity. But a trash pickup plan would be that the trash company actually pulls into the site, drives through the property, collects the one container, grabs the other container, and then pulls out. Snow removal, I think that's an interesting question. In Ohio City, we manage a lot of properties down here. We generally have seen 4 to 5 at most big snows a year. We manage that all ourselves. We actually don't hire subcontractors for snow removal, so we're able to address it ourselves and get a better response time. We're also able to control what happens with the snow. This site's going to be able to allow itself to have a few different areas. Next to the trash, if we had mounds, we could put some snow there. As you go towards the back of building 1 down towards the most southern point, there's another area where if you needed to mound snow, you could push it there. But generally, there's ample space we feel on site to push snow into a corner, so to speak, and eliminate it. Bike rack locations. So a lot of them are inside of the main building. We'd also look to put some around the property where there's open air parking spaces for bikes. However, we want to provide security for bikes so they don't get stolen, things like that. Another important part too is with the, you guys actually heard a presentation on the transportation demand proposal planning is working on. We believe we'll be able to satisfy the requirements for this property with their proposal, what they've kind of outlined as it's a point system of what you need to do in order to qualify for that. So that is our intent to do that. A door on 44th, we've thought about that. It's into a garage. It's not necessarily something we're opposed to. The way that the building is accessed right now is kind of off of that interior street. Wouldn't be opposed to putting a door there. At this point, we haven't put one there, but it's not a make it or break it for us if that was something this commission wanted. Yeah, any other questions I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Chad. I'll just make one brief observation. That north driveway was originally proposed as a two-way drive, and it looks to be of substantial width now, considering that it's proposed as a one-way drive. So is there potential to make that drive a little narrower at the third building to expand that sidewalk for access?
We have no issue with that. It relates to, I think, fire access, though. They require about 20 feet or so. So
I can't see that dimension. What is that dimension on the drawing?
That is correct. The fire is requiring a 20-foot drive, and that's what we're providing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also to respond, I'm sorry, to some of the other comments, we have agreed with Ohio City Incorporated to participate and help pay for a traffic calming study over there. In the past, we've also offered to lead or participate in an effort to work with the city to figure out a traffic solution for this overall area. My office, actually, where I'm sitting right now, I'm the corner of the 3500 Lorraine building. So I see the traffic here. This intersection is much less busy. However, being that it's primarily residential, I was actually taking my daughters to school yesterday, and I drive down Lake in the Gold Coast, and then there was a detour There was a side street north of Lake, right there on the Gold Coast, that had speed bumps in the middle of the road. Certainly made me slow down. I'd be happy to participate, as I've offered in the past, in some type of improvements of that nature. I mean, we can't, as a developer, install traffic lights and stop signs, but we fully want the neighborhood to be a safe, walkable area, and that's what we feel. In the building across the street where Sherwin-Williams retail is, the office portion of that has now been leased to a government entity, actually. So we'll have 100 new jobs across the street. So we really feel Lorraine has built itself up to being a walkable, live, work, and play type of street where this building fits right in. There's really no density over here almost at all. So we plan to just help continue to be a good neighbor through this process and helping the area grow, helping the area become safe, and be a place everyone can enjoy.
All right, thank you for those additional comments. Now I'll open the floor up to additional questions and comments from the commission.
Sure. Go ahead. I know I've sat in a lot of these presentations, and I really like the direction this has gone. I know I've said it in the past. I think this has always felt like a multi-building complex, and not one big building. So I really appreciate the direction that it's gone, and I think it's a much better project for that. Personally, I think I would be okay with a little more of the vinyl siding where it's visible from the public right away and from Lorraine. I think I would like to see more of the hardy plank or the fiber cement siding, or fiber siding on both building 1 and 3. And I do also agree with the windows on Lorraine for building 2 to be a double hung. The height doesn't bother me so much. I don't live in that neighborhood, so I can understand that the back of building 2 might be too big for some people. I think for me, I think this is more appropriate than what had been previously proposed, and I can appreciate the building as it sits.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sandberg.
If you don't mind, I forgot to address one thing the staff members brought up. The setback of where we're at with this building, even to the conceptual massing we presented maybe a month or 2 ago to this board, it's been set back significantly as well from our original plans. We've really set this building quite a bit back. And again, reminding you, we back up to a parking lot, the back of someone's property that is a garage. So there's really no residential neighbor within even a couple, almost 150 feet from the back of this building. So it's not towering over anything. Just going to point that out.
All right. Any other comments from the commission? I have a question with regard to parking ratio, and it's kind of a coincidence that the start of this meeting addressed a report from city planning on transit-oriented development. And to a great extent, the height of this building is dictated by a parking garage at grade, which adds an entire floor to the building. And what is the existing ratio of units to the parking that's proposed as presented?
Denver, do you have that?
There are 87 units and 48 parking spaces.
And so with the current zoning, does that meet zoning, or do you need a variance for parking under the current conditions?
We would need a variance under the current conditions.
And so are you proposing to use some of this transit development strategy to get some points to support that variance request?
Absolutely. I don't believe the plan is final from the Planning Commission, but from what we've seen of their their intent of what they want to execute on, we believe we can satisfy, not just get a few points, but I think we can satisfy the requirements for a building this size and whole.
Mr. Chair, can I ask another question related to that? Can you express your intent on what you think you may contribute from the multimodal program, the transportation demand management program?
Yes, let me, I had something on this.
So like giving specific examples of what you may include.
Yeah, let me, I
Too
had.
bad, man left.
Yeah, no, actually, we did an internal review of the scorecard, but is anyone able to pull that up? I got to look at.
Matt left. He's got the scorecard.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that can be a follow-up, just as.
Yeah, but
it's.
There were, I felt with this building in particular, we were easily able to satisfy the requirements. So, and that would be our intent as well. I apologize, I can't say specifically. Last meeting, I had a whole scorecard for the Ohio City meeting, and I don't have it right now.
Okay, understood. But it would be interesting to see how potentially this building could be slightly reconfigured to the north. If you eliminated some of that parking to the north, accessed it from the west, and was able to step down the building on the north. It's just timing wise, could make a difference. All right. Any further comments? Okay.
I can go ahead, Mr. Chair. So please bear with me as I have many thoughts. I'm trying to share my rationale here. So I want to share some comments both from a planning perspective and a design perspective. I think from a planning perspective, certainly adding more housing along Lorraine, which accommodates the 22 bus, is one of the highest ridden and most frequent buses in the area. It definitely supports our regional goals around sustainability and the TOD process that Matt suggested earlier, and then also 15-minute cities. So overall, I think we can expect to see more housing on Lorraine in the future, as it'll help support the district and also support just a more walkable neighborhood. I think we've all acknowledged that this is a non-traditional site, and so there's a lot of challenges related to the design. I had a lot of debate within myself, even, but I think that the process has evolved. I echo Commissioner Sambury's point that, the 3-building site layout is much improved. I do think that there are some pros to the site plan that I'd like to call out. I do think that the alley and the access through the alley is a good pattern. It's seen in Ohio City. We see a lot of sort of alley access to the back. It creates a little bit of space, that 20 feet between the, single family, 2-family homes and a more commercial area. So I really like the addition of the alley pattern. I think the facade facing Lorraine is appropriate with the materials. I agree that the windows on the left should be double hung to match what else is on the facade. Broadly speaking, I think the height is appropriate as medium density. I think that there's precedent in Ohio City for 5-story buildings, including inside the neighborhood, like the West Virginia building over near St. Ignatius. I'll come back to the height in a second, though, because I want to comment on that. And then 44th and 45th Street buildings, the scale is much more gentle, and I think that the way that it's been configured will help with some traffic calming, actually, especially on 45th, because now you'll have this new visual to help guide and narrow your visual lane as you're driving up and down that street. And I do think that it will help contribute to that walkability. Okay, my final comment, and this is the part that I was a little bit struggling with, is, I have no personal qualms with the height, even in the back of the building, even at the front of the building, but I think it's, at first I really struggled with kind of the whole length of the building, just through the middle. because I worried that it might feel like a mohawk,
Mhm.
popping out, but I see that there's been some design considerations, changing the materials and the color halfway through the building, which helps a lot. And that, looking at this elevation, it doesn't actually rise too far above the building 1 and 3. But, my preference would be in the back if it were dropped down towards the back, just to give a little bit more buffer between the building and the residential. But I do think that there is precedence for a 5-story building with an alley abutting residential across our city. So I long-winded, but overall would say that I'm on a yes, with the preference and perhaps condition that the back be dropped to 4 stories.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Edmond?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having read public comments, and also I was virtually walking up and down Lorraine here. I don't have a problem with the height and the way you've treated it in the facade. I think the Lorraine facade composition is handsome, and I like the way that preserved small white building is sort of part of the facade composition. And I think the 3-building solution is a very smart and urbanistic way to handle this. Otherwise, this site, which otherwise would be very, very challenging. I do share the concern about the view from the east and west. And I notice on the west side, you return the brick significantly farther, which I think really helps that elevation. It's another couple bays, and it helps the definition of the balconies to read more on this side. So I would recommend returning the brick farther in a similar manner on the east side. I assume the gray color is intended to sort of help the mass of the building recede. But I think the effect is it makes it feel sort of gloomy, and maybe doesn't achieve the desired effect. So I would, encourage a little bit more study on the color. I would certainly support hardy or similar cement board over vinyl, just for the long-term value and durability of the facade. I also support the comment about the double hub windows to give it a more residential feel. But I think in terms of other building massing along Lorraine, what's there, and also other things that we've seen that are coming, for medium density along Lorraine, I think this is appropriate. And we don't know what will happen with those 2 corner sites. It may be that something else happens there in the future that will kind of help to fill that in. We don't obviously know, but overall, with a couple of relatively minor concerns, I support the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edmond. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I realize that this building is going to be pretty much in compliance with some of these future zoning changes that are coming down, but that doesn't negate the fact that there's a good deal of concern from the residents that I don't think have been seriously addressed. I realize that from a zoning and planning perspective, this is fine, but from the massing and the scale from a historical perspective, I think is just too large. I don't think it complies with Secretary of Interior standards, and that is a very profound concern for me. I also am pretty disenchanted with all the gray and the lack of color. I'm glad to see that at least like in the townhouses and the side units there, it's broken up. It's not a monochromatic mass like a lot of things that we see, but I think it's everything. All the colors are are just too dull and too gray, and there's already plenty of gray in that area, so that I find objectionable. Hardy on the elevations that face the street, I'm okay with vinyl on the back sides and areas that are not seen, but overall, yeah, I don't think it meets Secretary of Interior standards as far as scale and massing. So I cannot be supportive. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Any additional comments from the commission?
Mr. Chair, I did have one detail that I wanted to raise, that for the apartments on 45th, I would like to see a little bit more framing of the entryways. They look a little bare. So whether it's like low planters or just something to frame the doorways so it actually feels like an entryway, that would be something I would add as a condition. Small detail, but I think will help a lot.
All right. Thank you, Director. So the staff raised several comments in their report, which I think the applicant has effectively addressed. There's been additional comments from the commission broadly discussing materiality and some detailing. I heard the applicant already concede to changing the window style configuration on the south elevation on Lorraine for the new building. And I personally don't have a problem with the materiality in terms of the transitions from hardy to vinyl. So I'm not sure if the ultimate motion is going to include some stipulation or just consideration with regard to materiality and some of the detailing that the director has expressed. So given those comments, I'll open the floor to consideration of a motion on this application. The chair can't make a motion.
I'm going to attempt to make a motion and cover all, so please feel free to amend if needed, commission members. I make a motion to approve the project with the conditions that the materials be hardy.
A condition.
Condition. I would like to make a condition.
All elevations of all buildings, just for clarification.
Maybe somebody can help me out, because I trust Commissioner Sandberg on this one, so maybe when I finish my motion, you can amend. So we'll come back to materials. Condition to change the double hung windows on the front facade on the west side. Excuse me, the two double hung on the west side. That they're
South side.
West, yeah, the Lorraine facade.
the Lorraine. Let me start over. Can I start my motion over again?
All right.
Okay, I've got a whole list.
Reset.
Okay, reset. Okay. I make a motion to approve the project with the condition that the Lorraine facade windows on the western side, I'm saying west on the, as in like I'm looking at Lorraine, south facing but left side of the building be double hung. That there be a condition to add framing along the entryways on the West 45th Street entries for building 1. I would like to add the condition that they extend the brick further on the 44th facade, just to match the other side. You know, that there be a consideration for the color change from gray to something else, and the consideration of dropping that back portion down to 4 levels. And then if somebody could help me out on the materials.
My comment was the south facing elevation of building 1 and 3.
South facing elevation, building 1 and 3, facing Lorraine, Correct. Hardy.
As well.
Yes. I will add that to my motion.
As a stipulation.
As a condition.
Mm-hmm.
So the material be hardy on just the south?
Building 1 would be south And
as presented
Okay,
great.
with the addition.
building 1 south, Hardy, okay, and then building 3
South Hardy.
south as well, okay.
Right.
Yep.
We're already saying Hardy.
And I think there's a return on the north side on both sides as well.
Okay.
Would there be a consideration to add a consideration that they look at the window material, upgrading the material
Oh.
from vinyl?
Oh,
Just, fiberglass,
Fiberglass or composites.
right? As, I would say as a condition that they consider that,
So
It's up to-
Consideration
Is that
or-
consideration or?
just a consideration.
Consideration. Is everyone, considering the consideration of, aluminum,
No,
fiberglass?
fiberglass or composite.
Especially on the street frontages. So 44th,
Exactly.
45th and.
It may be a condition of the street frontage.
Okay,
And then
all right, I will amend that to
With
say
the
a
condition.
condition.
Running out of paper.
That the condition be on the street frontages, Lorraine, 45th and 44th be the aluminum or fiberglass windows. That'll really elevate the look.
Okay.
So. Got it, Dan?
Think so, yeah.
Great.
All right. We have a motion. We need a
I'll
second.
I'll second. I think you've covered everything there.
Yeah. Mr. Sandberry's already second. All right, so we have a motion with several conditions and a second. Any further discussion?
I would just make a recommendation to check. I believe Ohio City has an approved color palette from many years ago that they may be able to reference for something other than gray. And to, with that, any guidance with that, to check that.
The applicant's done several projects in Ohio City. So are you familiar with a standard color palette from OCI?
Oh,
You're muted, Chad.
Yes, I think there's even Sherwin-Williams historical color palette, that we can pick some other options.
All right.
For the record, I love gray, so.
That's good, just gonna muddy the water.
Want me to add?
No, it's a consideration. It's only a consideration. It's not a.
All right. So we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Dan, please call the roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson,
No.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Edmond,
Yes.
Director Wong,
Yes.
Mr. Sandberry,
Yes.
Mr. Trasick,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
and Mr. Strickland.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Chair, the vote passes 7-1.
All right. Looking forward to seeing the project advance.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate all the feedback through the process.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that closes our agenda. Consideration of certificates of appropriateness. We'll move on to landmark nominations. I have to take a break. You can proceed.
We'll wait just a moment.
We're gonna continue now.
We're gonna jump into this and, it's the American Gas Association Appliance Testing Laboratory located on East 62nd Street in Cleveland. Here it is, the building is located on the west side of East 62nd Street, north of St. Clair Avenue. Although there is documentation of earlier gas stoves, the first patent for one was issued in 1826. When gas appliance use grew, when pipe gas became more available in U.S. cities, with that influx of gas appliances, by 1900 it was noted that comprehensive standards for these devices was needed. And what these comprehensive standards could do was remove appliances with inferior design and state exactly what was constituted a serviceable piece of equipment. By 1903, some general specifications had been created. In 1915, there was a trend towards a national standard with the creation of a fuel gas code. In 1918, the American Engineering Standards Committee was established, which is still in existence, but today it is known as the American National Standards Institute, or ANSI. Also in 1918, two associations merged into each other to become the American Gas Association. There were still obstacles to overcome. There were about 2,000 manufacturer and natural gas companies in the nation, many with different qualities, gas and different pressures and used in that. A large majority of domestic gas appliances were developed for manufactured gases, but now these needed to be improved for natural gas. A series of tests had to be developed to bridge all these considerations. Some companies in large cities had already created testing labs specifically for their local needs. Industry leaders agreed that the establishment of a central lab was a significant step and that the value of testing and appliance research could not be overstated. It was from these local companies that the AGA took inspiration. The AGA Appliance Testing Laboratory was created as an impartial, non-commercial lab operating as a non-profit or central agency of standardization. Its purpose was to raise the standards of performance and construction of gas appliances, the elimination of hazardous and inferior types of equipment at the earliest possible date, creation of greater confidence on the part of the gas-consuming public in the merits of gas-burning equipment, and securing the cooperation of gas companies and dealers in merchandising only approved types of equipment. Cleveland had been chosen as a location for the lab due to its centralized location to the manufacturers for both natural and manufactured gases. In 1925, the East Ohio Gas Company donated space on their campus while manufacturers donated equipment for the testing purposes. About 555 appliances manufactured in the United States in 1925, including gas ranges, water heaters, space heaters, steam boilers, etc., with the models numbering into the thousands. Throughout the nation's manufacturers used the Blue Star or AGA name as advertising material. The Blue Star did not symbolize high quality, but indicated that the model complied with minimum safety requirements and would operate safely and efficiently under all normal conditions of service. If you couldn't afford a high-end model, you could still know that the lower cost appliance would still deliver you the same safety standards. Also in 1925, Baltimore, Maryland became the first city to enact legislation specifying that all appliances sold or offered for sale must conform with the specifications of the AGA. From its opening in 1925, through December 31st, 1927, the lab approved 7,198 models of gas appliances, with only 4 being approved on the first attempt. They still had approximately 40,000 models to review. So with this increased demand, they required new space. Seen here in the conceptual image of the new building. Architect was the Osborne Engineering Company, which was founded in 1892 and is the oldest engineering company in Cleveland. They have designed and built many structures, but are well known for creating more than 100 sports stadiums throughout the country. The new building was just south of the East Ohio Gas Company plant on East 62nd Street. In 1928, testing services were also extended to the Canadian Gas Association. This is not just a lab for employees. Visiting manufacturers could also use it, which allowed for the refinements in design at the lab and in consultation with testing engineers. Testing included construction, performance, and description. Over the next 4 decades, the contributions to gas products and safety would be great. Testing on the mixing of gases, developing more than 50,000 separate tests to determine gravity and heating value variations, hundreds of major research projects and incidental investigations, establishing approval guidelines for bottled gas appliances like butane and propane, inspectors traveling over 200,000 miles a year, greater than 4,200 site visits, not only scheduled but surprise as well. So let's make sure that when they approved a prototype, that when it went into production, it met those standards. It could be awarded a Blue Star, it could be rescinded as well. An appliance did not need to meet the standards as they were voluntary. However, with other cities following Baltimore's lead, compliance was achieved through building or related codes or required by utility companies. In 1930, the program expanded to include a West Coast branch. This inspection station had all the same service as the Cleveland location, but did not grant final certification. This helped reduce shipping and production costs related to new appliances. And I wanted to include pictures of the staff at this time. On October 20th, 1944, 2 gas storage tanks failed at the East Ohio Gas Company plant. The resulting gas ignition and explosions created one of the most disastrous fires in Cleveland history. It devastated more than 1 square mile, destroying or damaging nearly 200 homes and factories and claiming 130 lives. Based on its proximity to the plant, the north side of the building received a bit of damage. Luckily, the gas storage tanks at the rear of the building did not receive much damage apart from discolored paint on the first tank. Given the force and the blast of the resulting destruction, it is a wonder that this building survived as it did. Repairs to the building began immediately, and in 1945, the cornerstone was relaid, but the proposed 2-story addition did not come to fruition, but the AGA took over the 4 residences on the 2 adjacent southern lots for storage purposes. A few years later, the addition was approved and the house was demolished. In 1960, the addition to the north of the property was constructed. And after much searching, able to find the rendering of the southern addition from 1950. Nearing the end of the decade, the AGA decided to move to a larger, newly constructed facility, 50% larger than the East 62nd location. After the AGA left, the building became the Development Engineering Center for the American Standard Incorporated and the Tappan Air Company Conditioning Division. It was listed for sale in 1977. A little bit of a gap, couldn't find much information. There were additional addresses for this location. So between 2001 and 2022, ownership bounced between various LLCs before falling into foreclosure and into the Cuyahoga County Land Utilization Corporation. On March 31st, 2022, the property was obtained by 2030 East 62nd LLC, and they began the task of preparing the building for reuse. Having been abandoned for a few years, there was a lot to clean. It had been a dumping ground, and all told, 50 dumpsters of garbage needed to be hauled away. And today, with our current conditions, able to go and meet with the owners on site, here are our exterior photos. It maintains its integrity. There are a couple other additions you'll see up on the roof as well. Nice, cleaned out, ready for reuse. And I am hoping the owner is with us today. She's I sent her an invitation. And I'm hoping that she might be able to talk a little bit about the future plans for the building, but there are futures for reuse. Andy, are you with us? If not, it is a significant building, part of our industrial heritage, and relation to the American Gas Association and international standards of gas, actually with Canada. They have contributed, even though current day the gas companies or the gas industry is under quite a bit of attack from pollution and such. Without this, we don't have the safety standards that we use today. So submit this for nomination.
That's great. Thank you, Carl. Should we take action on this before we move to the next one?
Yeah, I think we should handle them individually.
Okay.
So.
All right. Thank you, Carl, for that presentation. Any comments or questions from the commission?
Is the addition part of the significance?
Yes, because it's over 50 years, so 1960. They are looking to remove some of the stuff on the roof. It's not visible. It doesn't contribute. There is 2 pop-ups up there. So yeah, this stuff will remain, but there's some other stuff that can go. But yes, the 1960 editions, they were still in the building. So we are putting the period of significance from their time in the building from 1928 to 1969. So.
And so I think you said that the current owner supports the landmark
They
nomination.
approached us, they filled out the application form, and I was given a tour of the interior by them, so.
Okay. And is the council person?
From what they said, yes, and I'm sure that once we send it over, get him up to speed as well.
All right. Any other comments or questions from the commission? If not,
is there any intent to list this nationally?
I don't believe so at this time. It might be something that if we get an AmeriCorps member back, this could be something that we do an NRQ on. National Register questionnaire. And if it is, then great. If it's not, then we have it.
Yeah. Okay. So I would entertain a motion to advance this nomination through the landmarks process.
I'll make a motion to support this.
Okay, to move forward. Sandberry. We have a motion, a second. Mr. Dryer?
Second that.
Okay, Ms. Anderson. I'm looking for muted mics and I'm confused as to this. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Dan, please call the roll.
All right, we're down to just a few of you, but Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dryer?
Yes.
Mr. Sandberry?
Yes.
Dr. Williams?
Yes.
And Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to our next nominee for landmark status, the First Hungarian Reformed Church on 2850 East 79th Street.
Thank you. One thing we are fond of saying is that the history of a place isn't always obvious. Looking at this overhead from just a few years ago, it doesn't tell the story of what this used to be. And even this is outdated, as this is where Opportunity Quarter runs through and cold storage plant, which is being built on basically on the property behind where we're talking about. However, once upon a time, this was a thriving residential community. An estimated 1 million Hungarians came to America during the Great Migration between 1870 and 1920. In 1900, there were 9,558 Hungarians in Cleveland. And in the 1920 census, it showed that over 42,000 people stated they were born in Hungary. A distinct neighborhood came into being during the mid-1880s. The Hungarians settled around Madison Street, now East 79th, and Woodland Avenue from 65th Street onward. Streets with particularly heavy concentration of Hungarian residents, including Bismarck, Rawlings, and Holton. The neighborhood developed near several major factories on the southeast side of Cleveland. Here we're noting the tremendous growth of that area in just under 2 decades. Cleveland was the first location of several Hungarian church denominations in North America. First Hungarian Reformed in 1891, St. Elizabeth's Roman Catholic in 1892, and St. John's Greek Catholic Church also in 1892. So arrival in the neighborhood. So Trinity Reformed Church was established in 1891. It is the first of all Hungarian congregations in the United States. Their charter was secured the following year, and the first church building was constructed with the cornerstone laid September 23rd, and then completed and dedicated in 2000. In 1896, they merged with the Reformed Church of Hungary. With the growth in the neighborhood, a larger church would be needed in less than a decade. Here we have a picture of the cornerstone ceremony with the school that's in the background. And then see here, construction began in 1903 and it was dedicated on Memorial Day in 1904. The architect was Cleveland architect Paul Matzinger. Some examples of Mr. Matzinger's work: he was an architect for numerous churches, apartment buildings, and terraces throughout Cleveland. There are many examples of his buildings as contributing to historic districts or being individually designated.
These are all in Cleveland?
And here is a photo of the dedication day of the church. We were able to, this congregation does still exist. They're in Walton Hills, and they were able to provide many of these photographs for us, which was great, because what it also does, it informs some of our decisions later on when it comes to these windows. You'll see in the 1916 was their silver anniversary. The congregation purchased a house at Buckeye and East 123rd. People were moving from the Holton and 79th area up the hill into the Buckeye area. They purchased an acre of land in 1925, and in 1932, the construction began on Bethlehem Hall. Then they began groundbreaking for the new church in 1948, and then the dedication of the grand church was on September 4th, a part of which Bethlehem Hall is. This is the grand church, and this is designated as a Cleveland landmark on March 21st, 1977. So with the construction and use of Bethlehem Hall as a stone church, it was made available for sale. It sold the second New Hope Baptist Church, which was formed in 1924 as the New Hope Chorus. In 1930, they merged with Narive Baptist Church and became the second New Hope Baptist Church. And then in 1940, they moved into the stone church. I'm only giving a brief history of this congregation for now. Spoiler alert, we're going to talk a little bit about them next year. Foreshadowing.
The congregation?
Yes. Congregation. Oh, yes. Building history. So the steeple was removed in 1956. And luckily we have a bunch of permits that can show us that, which is nice. And they installed a baptismal pool in 1977. Oops. So here we go, 1963. And then a little bit later, I think this was in 1987. This building was originally nominated as a landmark in 1987 and followed the procedures as what legislation was introduced, and it went to the legislation committee and the planning commission. It used to have a third step to go to finance back in the state. That's been eliminated through here. Once it's nominated, then it goes to the planning commission, and then it goes to our TP&S committee, the council committee. There's no documentation why the ordinance stopped at this point. So the building was not designated in the time where the congregation decided to move. And once they had moved and weren't pursuing it anymore, the ordinance was tabled by council, and that effectively ends the designation process. In November of '89, the church was sold to New Community Apostolic Faith Church, and despite my best efforts to find something on them, I could find they exist. and that's about it. Another designation letter was sent in 2002, no further action taken. Sometime they abandoned the building and it fell into disrepair and into forfeiture, also falling into the Cuyahoga County Land Realization in 2018. Also in 2018, this building came up for demolition for city planning. This was part of the whole opportunity corridor project, storage. When it came up on the agenda, I was asked by my colleagues, the city planning, to come and speak to it in about preservation and such like that. So we had a lengthy discussion about this and what was needed. And after this discussion and all these different things, it was tabled. And Bert Bell Carr is the owner of the CDC. CDC is the owner of the building. They were, as a part of this whole thing, they were tasked with assembling all these properties for these future uses for a long operating corridor. So they said, we're going to hold this property. We're not going to take any action. We're going to do our due diligence. We're going to ask about, salvage plan, reuse, all those things that are required in the demolition code. And we had further discussions, and it was good. As a part of it on the city side, myself, Kim Scott, Anthony Santora, who was our architect at the time, we did a little survey or a study as to what could possibly be done with this property. And we'd be removing the addition that was on there and then finding something else. We were looking at potentially housing for people who had aged out of other programs and stuff, permanent housing, and maybe training, use and reuse of the church as a business. So currently, there's 3 parcels here. The first one is owned by the city of Cleveland, Land Realization. The Zone LLC, which is Bell Carr, they are in the process of obtaining that. So the designation, and we do our legal description, we will probably want, because we won't want to have that access way in. And then the southern part is part of the city of Cleveland, and this abuts immediately to the train tracks. This was rezoned as part of the Opportunity Corridor project, and since this is a prime candidate for reuse, this is also zoned as limited retail. You can see that this was changed in 2021, so that corridor along E79 supports a reuse of that nature. So in 2019, it pretty much has remained unchanged. They have taken some stabilization on the roof because there were some spots on the roof that needed to be secured. You see there's where the school used to stand in the back was probably not filled in correctly. And an interior shot that was provided to us. It's a large space. And I do show this as an opportunity for reuse I've been traveling all over the state this year, and I was in Troy, Ohio recently, and you can see that this was a church that was reused and could have a similar type of setup or reuse. And that would support this here. Also important that you can see its proximity to the train. And I believe RTA is working on making this a more accessible area, so there is activity going on right here. So I don't know, do we have somebody from Burton Bell Carr, or Kenya Gray, our city planner, is here, and then I think we may have a representative from Burton Bell Carr as well to speak on.
Mr. McBride is also here. Yeah.
Okay, Mike McBride. Okay, great. So Kenya, if you'd like to speak first.
Yeah, I just had a couple quick comments. So if you could go back to the site plan, I think like 2 more. Okay, this will suffice. So basically, the forested areas looking to potentially be deforested, and so the RTA is thinking about having a dual entrance possibly at that train station that's just south of this landmark parcel. So There may be more accessibility for it for residents as well as visitors to come through and potentially give this building more business if it becomes a brewery or if it becomes anything that people can spend time at. So, yeah, just want to say that.
It also supports the businesses in the area as well. Because the Orlando Bakery is right across the the cold store, so there could be potential. Mr. McBride.
Hi, good morning. I represent Burton Bell Carr as the Director of Real Estate Development, and we do support the landmarks designation for this property. I think in addition to just the historic significance of it that Mr. Brun just talked about, it also it sits in a really interesting spot in the city now on East 79th. It's between two rapid stops and a traffic signal and opportunity corridor. So we think it has, and I think it has something to do with some of the things on the agenda earlier today. I wasn't at the whole meeting, but I'm told Matt Moss made a presentation about transit-oriented development. This site specifically has great potential with acres of city-controlled land around it. And there had been, as Carl mentioned, there was a proposal to demolish it a few years back to kind of assemble more land. And I think but I just want to point out that this thing could be a great sort of symbol of a vital neighborhood that's kind of being reborn if it's restored as part of the new development around Opportunity Corridor. And I think you guys the committee was looking at a project earlier that had proposed, taking down a historic building for a bigger new building. And then it got sort of reconfigured so that the historic building stayed and the new development happened around it. So I'm thinking that when the potential for developing Opportunity Corridor, comes to be, this building can stay here and be sort of an anchor and a reminder of the historic vitality of this neighborhood as it's reborn. So we have spent some money stabilizing it, and we're working on plans to take it to the next level, to look for tenants and use and a use for it that is in line with the rezoned East 79th Street connector between around the Opportunity Corridor. So thanks for this opportunity.
Right. Very good. I think it's wonderful that you've been such good stewards of this property and stabilized it so that it can be effectively repurposed. So that's great. Any other comments from the commission? Not all.
I do. So you have 3 parcels that are included in the nomination?
No. Currently, we're looking at the 2, but I think one of the things we have to look at, because those lines kind of bisect the one, I think we're going to have to look at, will there be a lot split and consolidation and make something that makes a little bit more sense for potential parking or what RTA's needs are. So it's basically, we're looking at the top 2 parcels, not the 3rd.
So that's for future development, or is that because that's the original campus?
We try to avoid designating vacant lots because it creates issues later on. It makes sense to designate driveway because they will need it for access no matter what happens. Those 2 can be done. The 3rd lot, we'll have to have discussions with Burton Bell Carr and city and RTA and understand what those future needs are, and maybe we figure that out later. But right now, we just want to get the process started.
And so these 2 lots have common ownership?
One is city. There's city owns both on either side.
And what was the original campus?
It was all 3.
Okay. So the driveways to the
north,
plan north, or okay.
Yeah.
So those are the 2.
Yeah, this is the driveway here. This is where the school used to sit here, and then there used to be a parsonage here.
So the parcel numbers are indicated there, and so you'll include those parcel numbers.
Definitely the top two, and if it needs to be reconfigured, then yes.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Williams?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say I think this is wonderful that Burton Bill Carr owns this building, stabilizing it and trying to have it designated as a historic landmark. This is my old neighborhood. I grew up on 78th Street off Kinsman, and I remember catching the rapid right there on the hill by the church, going to Coventry and Shaker and taking the school bus to Hawken Upper School. So there's a lot of history in this neighborhood related to Hungarian Americans and African Americans and migration and immigration and neighborhood change over time. And I will say, as someone who does not own a car and rides a lot in Lyft and Uber vehicles on that Opportunity Corridor, this is one of the few landmarks that lets me know that there is an effort to preserve the old as we embrace the new and build all kinds of new activities in that neighborhood. So I hope that there will be a way to preserve that historic site, and also maybe with the adaptive reuse of the building to incorporate some kind of program that would remind us of the history of the Hungarians and the African Americans, a long history of Hungarians and African American citizens in that neighborhood. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. All right. With no further comment, I'll entertain a motion to advance this nomination for a landmark designation.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Sandberry. Do we have a second?
I'll second. This is Alan.
Okay. Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please, Dan, please call the roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Sandberry,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
and Mr. Strickland.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to our last agenda item, which is approval of meeting minutes for the 4 dates that are listed there. I'll take a motion for approval of meeting minutes.
This is Alan. I'll make the motion.
All right, so Mr. Dryer moves to approve the meeting minutes of September 26th, 2019, August 10th, 2023, September 14th, 2023, October 6th, 2023. We have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second.
Very second. All right, we have a motion and a second. No further discussion on the motion. Dan, please call the roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Sandberry,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
and Mr. Strickland.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the motion passes unanimously.
Wonderful. Do we have any administrative reports today?
No, that's me. It's been a long meeting.
I hate to catch you off guard.
Woke me up. Yeah, no real administrative report, just that we only have 3 minutes left, or 3 meetings left for the year, which is kind of hard to believe, but
Right.
yeah,
Goes fast.
that's it.
Okay.
Appreciate everyone's time.
With that, I will adjourn the meeting and look forward to seeing everyone on November 9th. So enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.